All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council study session for Monday, February 12th. We have about 4 items on the docket for tonight. Up first is Director of Communications Chris Hargith and our Marketing Manager Vanessa Davis, here to present and review the city's existing social media policies. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm Chris Hargith. I'm the Communications Director, and we're here to present on our social media policies and platforms. And our Marketing Manager, Vanessa Davis, is going to give this presentation, and I'll be here to help answer questions if necessary.
Hi, thank you. Hi, thank you all. So social media at the city is really important to provide a centralized communication hub for sharing different events and strategies throughout the community. It's about creating and maintaining a two-way form of communication at the heart of it. And it's really maintaining that cohesive identity for the city in our posts. The City of Inglewood is on the majority of the major platforms on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, YouTube, Reddit, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have a variety of departments that are on platforms as well, including the Inglewood Police Department, Inglewood Library, Pirates Cove, Parks and Recreation, and Broken Teeth. Here's a quick overview of some of our followings by the numbers on our different platforms. At the city, for our government page on Facebook, it has our largest following, but Instagram has been growing pretty steadily year over year. Facebook on police has seen about an average of 20 to 30 new followers each week, which has been really great, creating that new communication channel with our community. Pirates Cove Facebook has our largest following at 10,000, and it's really a wonderful tool to promote the service in our community and marketing efforts. So why social media is so great is it does allow us to share information directly with the people that we serve in our community. It's also an amazing tool to address misinformation in real time, as we can respond to people's comments, or if we are hearing rumors about the city, attempt to put messaging out quickly to kind of combat that. We also use it for some more fun things, such as upcoming events or programs or community engagement, and just a way to share what's going on at the city with our community. It really allows people to also see what's happening behind the scenes of the city, and it kind of humanizes city employees and the work that we do. So we have an official social media policy. It is on our website. It can be found on the homepage, Our City, and then under policy. And what we strive to do when we're utilizing social media is to share emergency information quickly, such as the boil alert or a sinkhole. We really are utilizing this as an emergency response tool to get that information quickly into the hands of the residents when it is really important. It is also a way to engage with residents and business owners to promote our city-sponsored events and programs. We can let people know if something's canceled due to rain or something like that. And it's also a great tool for community outreach. We've had a lot of public engagement campaigns that we've utilized social media to really get that dialogue going with the community. In our official social media policy, there is the record retention, and all of our social media posts are bound by the state of Colorado's municipal records retention schedule. We also have a comment policy. We allow comments in response to all of our social media posts as long as they comply with our comment policy. We do not edit comments, but they may be removed if they violate that policy. So diving in a little bit more about our comment policy, it closely follows what is protected speech under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So any kind of post that's promoting unlawful activities, that is not covered. Profanity is more of a filter that sometimes social media platforms filter on their own, but we do not filter profanity for the most part due to it being protected speech. But obscene language is not protected speech, neither is obscene content. Also, anything promoting commercial speech, anything that feels like it, that is spam, we're very careful because we don't want our residents clicking on something from our official page that then gives them a virus. All comments are part of the Colorado Opens Records Act. The city does its best to respond to all comments in a timely manner. However, sometimes experts from other departments are needed to ensure that a response is accurate and comprehensive, which can delay a response. The city typically does not respond to rhetorical questions. In 2024, the city plans to adopt a social media strategies and guidelines. These guidelines will create a more comprehensive and consistent strategy across social media from our different city and department channels. This includes a content strategy. Creating a consistent social media calendar really builds that trust with our residents, and they know that they can come here for content, for information at these days and times. Currently, on the city's main pages, Facebook and Instagram, we have 5 time slots a day for posts. We don't always post 5 times a day, but there is a consistent 5 posts time slots available. Content consistency, again, it's very key in building trust. You don't want to post once and then not post again for a month. People are not going to follow you for that accurate information. And when we want people to know about emergencies or upcoming events, we want them to feel like we're the trusted go-to source. Our content should also be a mix of high-quality photographs and graphics that adhere to the city's brand standards. Creating these guidelines is really to help the city and department channels that we're all on the same page. Social media, it's going to include social media best practices, do's and don'ts, style overview, branding, consistency, style and grammar, graphics and photography, tips and tricks, as well as our policies around starting a new platform or channel, accessibility, compliance, comment moderation, and a First Amendment overview. In the past year, we've seen success on our social media, really getting the word out, either about dog parks or businesses in the community. Our holiday decorating contest is always a big winner. And then also sharing important news such as Oxford Avenue and Navajo Street being reopened. to get our social media analytics, we currently mainly use the platform. It's called Buffer. Every year we assess growth and trends to see what's working and what might not be. In 2022, there was a very clear trend that short form vertical videos received some of our highest engagement. And due to that, we've invested more resources in creating that kind of content that resonates with our residents. And also, analytics goes beyond just likes. It's more than that. It's when we can see a campaign's success is residents filling out a survey, they're attending an event, they're participating in a program. That's where we see how social media turns into real life engagement. Some of our social media success stories include the skate park renovation community engagement campaign. We utilize new trends such as the Instagram poll to get resident feedback on 2 different proposed skate park plans. We received more than 1,000 votes that were tallied and hundreds of comments, and actually the design that was chosen also utilized the comments from social media and from the 100 people that attended the skate park open house and updated the design. So community members really felt like their voice had a complete change and impact to this project. Eat, Enjoy, Explore is a campaign that was launched in 2021 with CARES funds to help our small business community recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, we brought this completely in-house and continues to be one of our most popular series, highlighting businesses and restaurants in the city. Also, starting in Q3 of last year, we launched the Uniquely Inglewood Good News posts. And this is a weekly campaign to bring awareness about a variety of wins and happenings in the city that might go unnoticed sometimes. Questions?
Ms. Davis, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Noonkamp.
Thank you for the presentation. Exciting to hear what you guys are planning for 2024, especially around engagement and followers. Do we have goals that we're aspiring to, like we're trying to get our follower count to a certain place, or are you approaching it more organically and kind of seeing what happens?
So for the city, we've kind of scaled that back a little bit because we are reaching kind of a saturation point for the city of our size. But for our other platforms such as Inglewood Police, Pirates Cove, Parks and Rec, we are still looking to build those. And we are trying to build ours. It's just less of a priority and more of a priority focused on engagement and really making sure people are seeing the posts.
That's helpful. And then with 5 posts a day, how do you measure on if it's too much content, if people are missing things? I know I often am in meetings where someone says, can't we post that on social media? How are you guys evaluating and making those decisions?
So that's really why we've created a social media content calendar, and it's something that I have control over. And we do not like to post 5 times a day because it can feel like a little much. Prior to this, there were times we were posting 8 times a day, and communication was really getting lost. So it's about being able to see a whole week, and I look at those 25 slots, and I'm able to push things more around. If I'm like, okay, there's 5 posts on Monday. This is too much. It could get lost in the weeds. Let's put some of these on Tuesday, Wednesday, where we only have 1 post to ensure that we're not making it where Facebook or Instagram is bolstering 1 post so much and hiding another just due to the fact that we posted 5 times in a short amount of time.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if I could add.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my 5-year anniversary with the city will be in May. And when I started, our presence on social media was really low. And so one of our primary goals was really just getting us in line with where we're seeing, cities of our size with their followings. And I think we've reached that. So like Vanessa said, you get to the point we're only so big. So it's difficult to say, oh, we want to, add another, 5,000 followers this year. So, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you, Director. Member Wright.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Thank you for the presentation. I knew that we're doing text messages now. Is that part of this? Because I didn't see it in the presentation.
So text message is considered something different from social media, but it does kind of go hand in hand with emergency messaging. It's kind of our two-prong or four-prong. We'll do it. We can send out an email. We normally will post it to the news story of our website, which is right on the homepage. Now trying to utilize text message as well as putting it on social media. So it's kind of, we really like to blanket all of our options to ensure people are getting the messaging.
And that is coming from communications department then?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have all these departments. Is all the communication coming from communication? So will the police department say, hey, I want to put this on our Twitter and stuff? And so communications will put that out for the police, or will the police handle their own communication?
So we've worked,
No, go ahead.
we've worked to centralize a lot of communications in the city. So currently, the communications department is in charge of any City of Inglewood page, the Parks and Rec department pages, and Pirates Cove. The Inglewood Police Department, their community relations and crime prevention specialist, Crystal Estman.
Oh, yes, yes.
She's in charge of their social media, and the library has a team behind theirs, but it is something that's been in talks to bring into the fold of the communications department at the libraries, but the police department does run independently.
And I could understand why they would run
Yeah, I would
it
also
that way.
mention the Broken Tee Golf Course. They do their own social media. But we also have, I don't know if you want to talk about the social media committee. We do have a committee of employees that I think you get together monthly.
Yeah, we're working to increase frequency of the committee meetings as we're putting together these guidelines and strategies. And yes, I don't know how I forgot, Broken Tee does their own marketing for the last year.
Yeah, but there is a united effort behind our strategies, yeah.
Right. And, I mean, we're a big little city with a lot to say, so I think. And then how does a small business become part of that, eat, explore, enjoy? Would they contact the city, or does the city, reach out to different businesses?
So it really started with, we were reaching out to businesses. We've also had businesses reach out to us. We kind of have an ongoing list to make sure we're not hitting someone too often, and we're really going into the nooks and crannies of the business community in the city. But one thing we've been wanting to utilize as the list grows, we have a Made in Inglewood business registry that we're encouraging any business to sign up for, and really utilizing that list then to do Eat, Enjoy, Explore.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And if I could add there, this is a partner, Eat, Enjoy, Explore is a partnership with the Economic Development Division. So we, work hand in hand with Darren, to select some of those businesses. If they reach out to us, we'll feature them. So it's open to all businesses in the city.
Oh, great. And getting the word out through tonight. Great. All right, thank you.
Member Pring?
Thank you for the presentation. It's really exciting to see the specialty campaigns, if you will, and that increasing the engagement within the city. I just have one quick question on when we have delays, to provide information back to someone who's asked a question. Do we have a typical timeline or guideline around that we follow? And if it's going to be more of an extended delay to gather that information, do we have like a placeholder comment that we would make to say, hold tight? Because I know if I'm engaging with social media and, I might be curious about something, I'm probably not going to remember to come back 24 hours later. So just wondering what our guidelines are around that.
Right now, we strive for a 24-hour turnaround. We've used placeholders in the past, but sometimes it has led to that people believe we're not going to come back, even though we do. So it's just, it could be something we could utilize more in the future if it is something that does feel like we are needing to gather more information, as it does. Sometimes our responses can be very thorough. We just did one and it was kind of a 3-paragraph, but I loved that we were able to provide a resident with answers to all of their questions.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the person who sees the comment may jump on there and respond. I know City Manager Lewis will respond personally from time to time, which we love. We may, somebody might ask a question on a post that's a month old or 6 months old, and those are easy to miss because they're not front and center. So, and I will do that myself. If I see a comment, I'll try to jump right in and answer the question. I think, what Vanessa pointed out earlier in the presentation is we really want to make sure our answer is accurate. So sometimes we need to go back to that subject matter expert. And, there can be a little bit of a delay there, but we want to make sure that our response is as accurate as it can be.
We also do have, for certain topics such as Flow It Forward or a campaign that's ongoing, we try our best to do a FAQs that we have that we can kind of give a quick response, because if this question has been asked before, we kind of have like, oh, okay, this is kind of a template, and then we can rework it if that isn't the exact question they asked, but that helps to cut down on the response time as well.
Right. That's great. Thank you so much for your answers.
Member Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. One question, how long is the records retention policy? How long do you have to retain the records?
We currently don't delete anything.
Okay. I don't delete anything either. But, and the other question is, and I know this is a little bit different because this isn't social media. There is an entire demographic in Inglewood that doesn't use social media or anything but telephone and probably the magazine. Are we reaching out to that demographic as well?
Yeah, we really utilize a multi-prong approach. It is about traditional and digital media and engaging with residents who may not have access to a computer, that might not be digital savvy, and connecting with them with the information that we have. So we utilize the Inglewood magazine. We also really utilize flyers, especially flyering at the Malley Recreation Center that is geared a little bit towards an older audience. There's also a Malley postcard that goes out to people in the surrounding area. We tried to anything that's posted on social media is most likely also posted in a physical format somewhere around the city as well, to make sure that we are reaching everyone, no matter if they have a cell phone or not.
And I do have two things I'd like to add to that. You're going to see our first utility bill insert newsletter, which will be in March. And you all approved in the budget supplemental that we will do that every month, that there isn't a magazine arriving in homes and businesses. Also, our community message boards, I think we've talked extensively about those. They are manufactured, the first 4 of, not certain how many, but we're just going through a permitting process with CDOT, so you'll see those throughout the city also.
Thank you. And so just, is there a way that we can gauge the effectiveness of the utility bill? I mean, there are some people that have said to me, I don't really even look at it until, the survey may have already been completed or something. So is there a way we can gauge how effective it is?
Yeah, I think some of it's going to be anecdotal, but also we'll include QR codes. And so we can track whenever somebody scans a QR code. We can see, for instance, if we have an upcoming town hall, how did that compare with it? Maybe it's a recurring meeting. How did that compare with last year? Or, any previous years? Did we see an uptick in attendance? But yeah, some of that can be challenging. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Couple of questions, and then I'll come to Member Ward. So first question, so it sounded like Facebook and Instagram are the ones that were providing the most information on a daily basis, or at least more frequently. Is that where we would go to for like the most relevant information? Or how does those posts differ from like YouTube or LinkedIn and that type of the other social media platforms?
So we definitely cater towards what that platform is for. So LinkedIn is more for, maybe it's a volunteer opportunity, a jobs post, the city has won an award, kind of accolades type of thing. YouTube is much more video focused. So if it's not a video, it will most likely be on YouTube. We've really transitioned off of X due to just different policies that are going around, and we just want to make sure we can consistently get our messaging out. And so our number one thing is trying to get people to sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter is ours. We own that. That is the way we can really connect with residents. And then next is the Meta platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. We do post on Nextdoor though every single day.
Okay. That was going to be my second question. Nextdoor. So you have some examples here of how you're interacting with the public in terms of some of the posts that you have. But with Nextdoor, it's a little bit different. I've gotten questions from citizens about why aren't we following up on some of the posts that come from Nextdoor? Can you kind of elaborate why we're not taking that same approach that we do on Facebook and Instagram to Nextdoor?
Absolutely. Nextdoor is a very interesting platform. There's actually two sections of Nextdoor. There is the public Nextdoor that we as a government agency are on and can see and post, and we can only see our posts, other government agencies' posts, and responses to our posts. And then there's private Nextdoor. So if you live in Inglewood, you're on private Nextdoor. So you can see public Nextdoor's posts and private Nextdoors. We cannot see citizens' posts that they make. Even if they reshare our post onto private Nextdoor, we are blind to that completely. We do have members of our team that live in Inglewood that do try to check Nextdoor. It's just Nextdoor can have 100 posts a day from residents. But if you guys see something on Nextdoor that you feel needs to be addressed, please let us know. Like, that is an amazing tool if you guys are on there and you see something and you have questions, to reach out to us and we'd be happy to
But I would say, we'll never be able to respond directly to those
That's
posts in
what- okay.
private
Yeah.
groups. Yep.
So the post that your reaction to a post would be just a brand new post talking about
Yeah, we would probably
either trying to refute or just trying to provide some context behind the original post.
if there's like a lot of misinformation coming around and we can realize that there is misinformation about dog parks or something like that, we can formulate a post then in an organic method to try to then respond to some of that misinformation and do it in that manner.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Member Ward.
I'd like to return back to Member Russell's question about records retention, because I don't think the question was actually answered. The question she asked was, how long do we have to retain the records? What's our obligation under the law?
Forever. City Attorney. Oh, fair.
All right, City Attorney Niles, could you chime in, please?
And is that for comments or for our social media posts?
I think both was what the slide addressed, so.
We followed the state of Kansas. I haven't practiced there in quite a few years, but it still just comes out of my mouth. We follow the state of Colorado Historic Preservation Commission guidelines. And so let me look it up. I don't want to get it wrong. So I'll look it up while I'm sitting here. If I find it before, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I can answer it to City Council directly after the meeting. But in general, yes, we do keep them indefinitely because it is a public-facing website, I suppose.
Okay, the slide makes reference to something called the State of Colorado's Municipal Records Retention Schedule. Is that in statute or is that?
No, that's published by the Historic Society. So it's the same thing, what I'm referring to and what that's referring to.
Okay.
There is a state schedule that the historic, I think I said Historic Preservation Commission. I have to admit, I'm still recovering. I'm recovered from COVID, but I'm still feeling the effects of it. But the State Historic Society is what publishes that, and all the cities follow it.
Okay,
So that's what I'm pulling up right now.
so these are a little different in that they're technically writings, but there have been occasions where we have published something inaccurate on our social media accounts, and we have had to change that. in which case we would not have record of the original posting, and we would not be following a records retention schedule because the original posting was inaccurate. So my question is, how does that factor into what our obligation is under whatever relevant law is?
I believe we keep a copy of everything that was posted, even if it's a comment that was removed because it violates the community standards or our public comment policy. We keep a record of all of it. I know there are services, and we talked about it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that there are services that will back it up for you, and they're crazy expensive. So we decided to do it manually instead because, frankly, we don't make many changes and we don't remove much.
Yeah, typically our practice is to leave the original post, but post an edit in the comments to that post.
And also to note, in last year, we had 738 posts on Facebook, and we had about 5, and 4 were grammar edits, and 1 was an inaccuracy. So this doesn't happen very often, and that one was screenshotted and saved for records.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any further questions from members of council. I guess just lastly, is there any expectation that you have of council in terms of just boosting specific or anything that you would like for us to do more of in order to get the word out about Inglewood and some of your social media postings, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook?
So a thing about Facebook is we cannot boost posts that mention you all. And if you would like, and you have a city Facebook page and you find that information relevant, if you can reshare, that's always great because those posts are not allowed to be boosted.
Perfect. That's good to know. All right. I don't see any further questions from members of council, and thank you very much, Ms. Davis. Thank you very much, Director Hargith.
Thank you all.
On the presentation.
Thank you all.
Have a great evening. All right, moving on to the second agenda item, we have Director of Public Works Victor Rachael, Chief of Police Sam Watson, Deputy Chief of Police Vance Fender, here to present an update on the city's Vision Zero program. Who's going to kick us off?
I will kick us off. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. We are happy to present today an update on Vision Zero and our traffic calming programs, as well as some statistical data for the city and the state. So things we're going to cover, just an overview, Vision Zero and traffic calming. We're going to touch on police data specific to the city of Inglewood. We'll talk about the work that's been done to date, and then recommendations and next steps. So just an overview of some Vision Zero data. So nationwide, we had over 19,000 people die in motor vehicle crashes, which does represent an over 3% decrease compared to 2022. And fatalities declined in both the first and second quarters. Colorado also saw a decline in fatalities. We had approximately 716 in 2023. This is the first decline in quite a while, a decrease of approximately 6% versus 2022. Looking into the reasons for this, primarily a couple things bubbled to the top. There was increased enforcement, so we saw slower speeds as a result. We also saw people taking better personal responsibility. There was an increase in helmets being worn for motorcycles. And then also bicycles, folks that impacted by vehicles on bicycles with helmets. And we saw a rise in seatbelts as well. All those things contributing to lower fatalities in 2023. So Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing the safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. This information has been shared before, but Vision Zero was implemented in the early 1990s in Sweden and recognizes that sometimes people do make mistakes. So the road system and related policies are designed to ensure those mistakes don't result in severe injuries when possible. It's a multidiscipline approach, bringing together stakeholders and looking for ways to address these complex problems. Something that's new that we've started to see, we are starting to see grant applications. If you are seeking federal dollars, that you need to have some form of Vision Zero adopted by your city. We've seen it as a prerequisite. An example is the SS4A grant. It's a USDOT grant. When you go through their process and you're doing your due diligence, they have a very long questionnaire that focuses on Vision Zero and what your local jurisdiction tactics are in order to apply for that grant. So Vision Zero, we like to say it's built around the 3 E's. We got education, engineering, and enforcement. And these all have quite details around them. So the first E is that education component. And DRCOG, Denver Regional Council of Governments, kicked off a process in 2019, interviewing residents about traffic-related issues. And then in 2020, they adopted a regional Vision Zero commitment to eliminate traffic-related fatalities and severe injuries on our roadways. And it's based on, for the DRCOG Vision Zero, a safe system approach that has 6 components. Those components are deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable, humans make mistakes, humans are vulnerable, responsibility is shared, safety is proactive, and redundancy is critical. City staff, just so you're aware, participate regularly in the regional Vision Zero working group with DRCOG and lots of other local jurisdictions, and that is headed up by DRCOG. Second E, engineering. This is purposefully designing things to reduce speeds and increase safety. The goal is to reduce documented speeding cut-through traffic, primarily on residential roads. And the goal here is to improve overall quality of life in our neighborhoods. Traffic calming is based on field collected data. We get a lot of requests and complaints. It's probably about a 50-50 on whether those complaints are verified or not, but we look for the data, and the data tells us how far people are speeding, the time of day they're speeding. It can also tell us what kind of vehicles. We can tell if it's a motorcycle or a 18-wheeler or a box truck. We can't tell if it's a Toyota or a Nissan or anything, but we can narrow it down to passenger vehicles versus other things using our data collection. Traffic calming also uses a variety of applications, and it's depending on that data and the documented issues. And it's used on local and minor collector streets, and Public Works is in the process of developing a program for that. On the screen on the right-hand side, what you'll see in the upper right corner is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. We have one of those on Broadway we're replacing with a hawk signal. Just to the left of that, you got the radar speed limit signs. We are replacing some of our older units with new units that actually collect the data and will tell us the number of violations, and we're able to share that with PD so they can do targeted enforcement. And at the bottom right, you see something called speed cushions. I believe these were mentioned recently in a council meeting. These are speed bumps that are broken into pieces, and the brakes are generally designed to align with the fire department's wheelbase so that a fire department can respond at speed, but my passenger vehicle, your passenger vehicle, our tires don't align with that, so you will go over the speed bump. So these are all things that we're looking at as part of our traffic calming toolbox. Up next, I'm going to turn it over to Police Chief to talk about accident data and our third E, enforcement.
Sorry, good evening, everybody. Appreciate the time, and full support for Public Works and the work they're doing towards Vision Zero, and it's a good example of the one team concept, and and partnerships between departments on trying to reduce the seriousness of accidents and traffic safety. So on the enforcement side, we focus our attention, our traffic enforcement attention at high accident locations, at school zones, and special project areas. Some of those we observe ourselves. Some of them we get passed on from the community. So where our focus is there. Traffic tickets enforcement is done by patrol officers, but primarily by the traffic officers themselves. Right now, we're fully staffed in the traffic unit with three traffic officers. Over the past couple of years, the special assignments like traffic has been pulled back into patrol to make sure that we meet minimum staffing for patrol. So the enforcement itself has taken a dip, but now that we're coming closer to being properly staffed, that we can return people into their special assignments like the traffic enforcement team, the traffic officers. So we also use different types of data gathering. We just got 2 new portable speed trailers that we're hoping to get out on the street here, Victor. I think we're getting pretty close on that, aren't we? Getting those rolled off, as well as different types of data gathering from Public Works. So the top 5 high accident locations in the city are listed up there. And I will say that with different initiatives that we've had over the years, these locations have changed, so we can have an influence on them. And so we look at the locations, and we try to be very specific on the accidents, on the day of week, the time of day, the direction of movement, the causation. As examples, like Santa Fe and Dartmouth, a lot of those are morning and afternoon rush hour, but if you look at Broadway and Bellevue, some of those are like noon rush hour, so we can be very strategic in our enforcement at the high accident locations. And of course, in the mornings, we're at the traffic officers or in the school zones as well. So some examples of where we've been successful using the 3 E's, education, engineering, and enforcement. We have quite a few of them that used to be up on the east side of Broadway on 285. The intersections of Penn, Pearl, Washington had a high number of accidents in the afternoon rush hour with people turning left, going eastbound, turning left across westbound traffic at an uncontrolled intersection. So merely by putting up signs there that prohibit that during the rush hour, we've all but eliminated those types of accidents, and those usually are pretty severe injury accidents. Taking a step back, the majority of our accidents in the city are non-injury rear-end accidents, so probably close to 70-80% of the accidents are non-injury, and they're rear-end accidents. But we also look at the locations where there are injury accidents, high number of injury accidents. So that was one example. On the west side on 285, putting up the red turn arrows. You've seen those at the intersections, Galapago, Inca, is it, Victor, I believe it? At Inca as well, has reduced dramatically the broadside accidents there, and those are usually injury-type accidents. The traffic calming on Oxford west of Broadway has helped considerably as far as speeding vehicles on Oxford itself between Broadway and Santa Fe. The intersection of Floyd and Broadway used to be one of our higher accident locations, and opening that up from the restricted left turn was significant. And then enforcement at Dartmouth and Santa Fe really helped us knock that out of the higher accident locations too. So I bring these up because I want to let you know that through a combination of the 3 E's, we have been successful in reducing the accidents and the seriousness of accidents. At the council retreat, there was a request for recent accident data. So I wanted to make sure that we included that in the slide. And as you can see over the 3-year time frame, that the number of accidents have come down, although they're still high. And then the fatal accidents listed over there off to the side. We don't get a lot of those, and those those are hard, we do a really good job of responding to and investigating and mitigating. And anytime there's a serious accident, we work with Public Works and they come in and analyze the location, the intersection, to make sure that all the signage is in place, that the lights are functioning properly, that the striping on the street is done. That's more of a program just to make sure that it's nothing that we've done contributed to those accidents. So does anybody have any questions on the enforcement side?
Did we want to go through the entire presentation, or
Yeah, is that Victor's, would you?
was that? I thought we had another one.
We can keep rolling, or however you guys would like to approach it.
I would prefer to wait until the very end for questions, so, and I don't see any difference. So yeah, let's just go through the end and then we'll come back to questions.
Okay, great. So next up, work that we've done to date. So I touched on this at the council retreat. So our traffic engineer position approved in the 2024 budget. We have conducted interviews with our qualified applicants, and I hope to get approval from HR to make an offer this week. We have introduced our preferred candidate to the team and brought him over to the shop. So we're pretty excited that this person will be hopefully onboarded here before the end of the month and ready to go. The traffic calming toolbox, this is something that the traffic engineer will be also working on. We did present an update and draft to ETAC last year, and we are looking forward to having that further developed, and then we'll be adding a budget line item for the 2025 budget to try and implement that. Traffic evaluation at Clayton Elementary. So this one has come up a number of times. Just recently, staff, including PD, Public Works, bless you, and the school met on January 10th to evaluate on-site conditions during the morning rush hour. And we have a follow-up meeting scheduled with the school. We're going to go over those findings and recommendations on the 21st of this month. Old Hamden Complete Streets, so that contract was approved by council on December 18th. We also held the design kickoff with our consultant on January 22nd. South Broadway Complete Streets, also approved on December 18th, and we held the design kickoff with our preferred consultant or selected consultant January 9th. The South Broadway mid-block hawk crossing, I mentioned this a minute ago. We're taking out the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. We're putting in a hawk signal. There's a picture of that on the right-hand side there. That is actually a legal red light, so cars have to stop when that's activated. We'll be coordinating heavily with our communications team on the functionality of that, because it'll be new for a lot of folks to see that type of signal and how it works. That design's in progress, and we expect that to be installed and active before the end of the year. Malley pedestrian improvements, we wrapped those up last year. We installed new crosswalks, updated ADA, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, and that project is done, and we got the bus stop back to the correct location. Evaluation of high accident intersections. Chief Watson touched on this. We're coordinating with PD. Our most recent analysis was done in 2022. You probably noticed on the list, a lot of those are state routes. So we're also collaborating with CDOT, making sure that information is shared and trying to find solutions that work for all parties, especially when it's their jurisdiction and we're providing that information to them. Next up, Dartmouth traffic calming. So we're looking forward to the installation of 2 roundabouts at high accident locations that are correctable by the installation of a roundabout. Roundabouts aren't the solution everywhere. Our traffic calming toolbox, we'll be looking at the accident data, the speeds, and making sure the tool that's applied is appropriate for the issue. That design is complete. Contract documents are being put together and being put out to bid. We will be coming to council. We've got some additional funding from CDOT, so we'll be bringing forward an IGA amendment on that shortly. Recommendations and next steps. So first up is implementation of specific transportation goals as outlined in the strategic plan. We have a number of goals in the strategic plan, which I touched on at the retreat, that are delayed, mostly due to staffing resources. With the onboarding of our traffic engineer, we look forward to advancing many of these delayed projects immediately. And those projects touch all 3 E's: education, engineering, and enforcement. Next, development of an internal framework to review data and make decisions around improving safety within the city. This is a review panel with Public Works and Police who will meet regularly to review crash data, talk about what PD is seeing, talk about what Public Works is doing, and find ways to collaborate further using that data to solve issues that we're seeing in the field, repetitive issues that need to be addressed through the engineering, education, and enforcement. Next, seek out grant opportunities and other funding. There are a lot of grants out there that we have not been able to tackle. Again, this goes back a little bit to staffing. Our traffic engineer position will have some responsibility in identifying these. There are lots of grants out there for equipment. There are grants out there for safety modifications. CDOT does a call regularly for that, that we could go for if we have the data and staff to support that grant. And that ties to our engineering availability within the community. Next, engaging with the community. Conducting a formal Vision Zero campaign to ensure that the public understands and knows what we're doing. Participating in things like neighborhood nights. Last year, Public Works participated in almost all events. We were focusing on stormwater. We did not focus on transportation in Vision Zero. This year, we would like to pivot, either have 2 tables or alternate, but get Vision Zero out there, talk about traffic calming opportunities, what can the public do, make them aware of our projects, the things we're doing and collaborating on with PD, and bring that to everybody's attention. We'd also like to continue our work with the Inglewood School District and safety assessments for all schools. Again, collaborating with PD and the school district, meeting their staff at these peak hours, morning or afternoon, understanding where their challenges are and looking for solutions that work for everyone. Collaborating with PD on specific locations and timing for enforcement. This goes back to our data a little bit. Those radar speed limit signs, if we can see, okay, we have a repetitive speeding pattern at 8:30 in the morning on whatever street, sharing that information with PD so that they know what we're seeing and vice versa. And that also goes with, as Chief Watson touched on, our mobile units. We'll be able to deploy those out to the neighborhoods and the collector roadways, arterial roadways, understand where those challenges are with speeding and timing. Next, completing the traffic calming toolbox. Again, that draft was presented to ETAC early last year and then has been kind of in the wings until we can get the position filled and try and move that forward through a process and then looking for funding for implementation on a regular basis. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Director-in-Chief, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions? Member Ward.
I have a few questions. First of all, I think it's pretty stunning that 4 of our 5 most dangerous intersections are intersections that we don't actually control design-wise. They're intersections of state highways. And I heard you talk a little bit about cooperation with the state on, fixing those things. But this, I think, indicates a pretty serious condition for us. I mean, we are not empowered to even solve the most immediate of problems at these locations, other than through enforcement. And I think, speaking of enforcement, since the state wants to control the design of these intersections, I wonder if we might engage even with State Patrol and say, look, these are hard intersections for us to monitor. They're obvious problem zones. Maybe we send a trooper or 2 out there every once in a while and do some enforcement to enhance the level of service that we're giving to our residents in the city. That seems like one thing that we could potentially do, particularly on that Santa Fe corridor where people are traveling through multiple jurisdictions and they have no idea which jurisdiction they're in to begin with. Secondly, I'm curious if the accident statistics include auto versus ped, or if they're just car versus car. Because those numbers, just from an anecdotal standpoint, seem a little low. I think we had multiple auto VPED incidents just on South Broadway last year.
I'm sorry, so your question is if the auto pedestrian accidents are included in the data?
Yeah, specifically the fatalities.
Yes, so those would be included either in the injury accidents or the fatalities.
Okay. And then last, as you were talking about speed control devices or, monitoring devices being the means of alerting the police department to problem zones, I'm curious if there's any type of technology similar for stop signs. This is one of the more common complaints that I get from my residents related to traffic is, residents or non-residents just blasting through this or that four-way stop without looking around. And that applies particularly to the school zones. If there is something like that, I think it would be helpful to us to deploy it so that we could monitor these situations and determine if we're actually having a problem or if we just have a resident who perceives a problem that isn't actually there.
Yeah, great question on the stop signs. I'm not aware of any auto detection device that can detect a stop and start. That said, we'll certainly look into it. One thing that we do look to include in the traffic calming toolbox are LED lit solar powered stop signs. We do have locations where the stop signs maybe aren't the most visible or there's a longer gap so they're not anticipated. That said, you also have to think about the flip side where now you've got a blinking stop sign all night long and proximity to windows and residents, they would be solar powered. But if stop sign running is identified through an application for traffic calming, that could be a potential solution.
I think I might have just happened on $1 million idea accidentally. Automated stop sign tracking enforcement.
Thank you, Member Ward. We're going to go down the row here. Mayor Pro Tem, then Member Prang, and then Member Wright, you had your light on, didn't you? No? Oh, it's on? It's not on over here, but all right, we're good. All right, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Director, Police Chief. I wanted to follow up on Member Ward's question about the fatalities. First of all, could we get, just in a follow-up, a breakdown of pedestrian versus just auto fatalities? I would like to know what percentage of our fatalities are really coming. Maybe even go a little further back over like a 5-year period, just to make sure we're understanding that. That's really, I know of at least three fatalities in the last couple of years just in my neighborhood that were pedestrian and bike. Guess I would include the bikes in that as well, and would like to see what the actual number breakdown on those are. My second question is, you talked about the Vision Zero toolbox. I also, in kind of some of my research, came across the idea of a Vision Zero action plan. What does the toolbox include? How is it different from an action plan? Are those separate steps in the process? Are we going to get to an action plan? Where are we at kind of in this whole deal?
Yeah, so Vision Zero, going back to the 3 E's, so the traffic calming toolbox is part of that, but implementing an action plan would be essentially the next step in the Vision Zero program, so to speak.
Okay, so that the toolbox, we're expecting to maybe approve and start budgeting for that this year, and then would we be looking at working on an action plan next year or something? What's the timeline?
So it'd be simultaneous.
Okay.
We'd hope to roll out a more complete traffic calming toolbox in 2024, which will identify budget needs for 2025 if we implement the program.
Okay.
At the same time, rolling out the Vision Zero action plan, of which the traffic calming toolbox is a component this year.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I might have more, but I'll let the others ask their questions first.
Member Prang?
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. So I have 3 questions, 2 related to enforcement. So I'll start off there. And maybe it's just a 2-pronged answer, but 3 traffic enforcement positions that we have for the city. How do we accomplish high visibility in our high accident prone areas with 3 personnel? And then I also saw in the presentation information about sometimes call loads might be high. So does that ever result in our traffic enforcement officers being pulled off of those types of duties to help respond elsewhere?
Yep. So, like I did mention, all of patrol officers have the ability for traffic enforcement, and they do. They contribute to our work. As an example of day shift in the morning during school times, the drop-off times, and then the pickup times in the afternoon. It's a very robust program we have with our patrol officers to patrol those. We have at least 10 schools in Inglewood that all request and want extra traffic enforcement, and it's all almost at the exact same time in the mornings and then again in the afternoon. So we supplement the traffic officers with patrol when they have the ability between calls and to be around the areas. But and they do write tickets, but the majority of the tickets, especially at the high accident locations, are from the 3 traffic officers. So we deploy them on different hours throughout the day. Try to hit the peak accident times to deploy them, and then obviously the patrol officers are out there 24/7 with the ability to do traffic as well. And
I think you got to what I was looking for. Like, how do you determine who goes where, when, and so it sounds like it's driven by data that you've collected over time in determining those are our high accident areas, and then what times of the day maybe we need to have that visibility present.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good on the enforcement piece. Thank you. And then the other more engineer-related question is, so as we're looking at, either doing improvements or major projects like Old Hampden and the 2 projects that we recently approved for complete streets, do we have a designated staff person that's in charge of vetting any of those improvements or new projects for through the lens of equity and accessibility? So I know that we're trying to get better with our ADA compliance, and I just want to make sure that, could it be the new traffic engineer coming on that's looking at any improvements suggested and having that lens on things so that our citizens with differing abilities, so whether you're in a wheelchair or you're vision impaired, et cetera, as we're discussing multimodal improvements or other types of improvements around the city, that we've always got like a checklist, if you will, that we're looking at it through that lens.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for those specific projects, each project will have to comply with state requirements and city requirements with respect to multimodal ADA accessibility and the federal requirements that layer those as well. Specific to project location and type of project, those projects were applied for given the nature of the corridor and the requirements or the call for projects with DRCOG, and then they're scored based on DRCOG's criteria when we applied for the grants. That aside, I would say that we are always aware and cognizant when we're doing projects that we're looking from the equity lens at each project and making sure that we're accommodating all with these projects and we're not isolating any particular group or need when it comes to multi-mobility through any particular corridor. But we do have the city engineer position. It's a combination, I believe, of that and probably the traffic engineer to make sure we're meeting all multimodal needs on the project when it comes down to the nitty-gritty details.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a couple of questions for both of you. In the information that Mayor Pro Tem was asking and the mayor was asking, can we find out with the fatalities and the injuries, how many, add to it and find out how many motorcycles were involved with that? Because I know we get the motorcycles that are coming through, and I think that's a big part of what's going on, so if we could kind of drill down a little bit more. And also, Chief Watson, can we get a number of tickets that were written around enforcement so we could get a view on if we're enforcing and stuff like that? I guess part of my question also is, what enforcement are we looking at? Are we looking at speeding? Are we looking at tailgating? Because you said majority of the accidents we're seeing are from rear ending. So are we enforcing tailgating, speeding? What are the type of enforcement are we looking at, I guess, would be one of my questions.
Yeah, the number of tickets is no problem. In fact, we've already gathered that information. It's in our community safety report on the on traffic enforcement.
Okay.
And so we can absolutely get that. As far as the targeted enforcement, we do just that at the targeted high accident location. So we break down the causation of accidents. So again, like I mentioned earlier, 70% of the accidents are rear end accidents. So you can look at different contributors to rear end accidents. You got speeding vehicles, you have distracted driving, you have following too close. There's a variety of contributors to rear end accidents. So we do try to be strategic on that. If it's a location where there's a lot of rear end accidents, then you could enforce the people running the red light, which is a significant problem, but it doesn't lead to the 70% of the accidents. We don't ignore it if we see one, but it's not as targeted as some of the other violations.
Right,
So
still breaking the law, right?
yes.
Okay, and then I have another thought. I had the pleasure of doing a ride along today, and we went, and I'm sorry, I don't know the streets like the officers, the names of the streets, but you may know what I'm talking about. We were next to or behind Walmart, where they did all kinds of work, probably for traffic calming. I could not make sense of it. And one of my big questions were, how do the fire trucks get through on an emergency? So it's like the side street, and then behind Walmart, we were in that area. And the officer told me they can't. They have to go a different route now because of the way, it's not a roundabout, but they definitely made the road smaller and more difficult for bigger vehicles to navigate. So when you're doing traffic calming and that type of thing, what is the thought in emergency vehicles? Or you've got stores there, Walmart, they have to have their semis get through and stuff like that. What is the thought process when you're doing traffic calming when it comes to emergency vehicles and semis and that type of thing?
So during the design process, we use CAD programs, computer-aided design, and then there's a program that layers on top of it called AutoTurn. It literally allows us to drive a vehicle on the drawing. We can spec the wheelbase, the length of axle, and simulate a vehicle going through the intersection. It'll show us the sweep path. It'll show us if they hit curbs. So we should be looking at the vehicles that go through there. I believe I know which intersection you're talking about. So I'll follow up with the team specific to the fire trucks. RTD also goes through that intersection, I believe. So we coordinate with RTD, should be coordinating with PD and fire on routes and making sure those design elements are accounted for. In particular, the two roundabouts that were mentioned in the presentation, those have what we call a concrete apron, so that vehicles, large vehicles that can't make the turn can track over it, not get stuck, and still maneuver through the intersection and get where they need to go. For the speed cushions, as I mentioned, the cuts in that are wide enough for fire trucks to go right through, no slowing down required. It would require PD to slow down in regular passenger vehicles, though.
So on a major thoroughfare like Dartmouth, why would the speed cuts not be used opposed to a roundabout? Because it is such it's one of our main veins through Inglewood.
So Dartmouth would probably fall under the minor arterial classification. And so typically, certain traffic applications wouldn't be applicable to that, given the amount of volume. If you were to put in something like speed cushions, you could see potentially a traffic queue in probably the hundreds of feet, maybe even thousands, as that stop, that shock, what we call a shock wave effect, where someone stops, the person behind them stops, and then you get that ripple wave. Traffic would back up pretty substantially through that corridor, where a roundabout allows traffic to keep moving and requires them to slow down, but doesn't have people slamming on brakes if they're not paying attention, and then cause that shock wave.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Member Russell and then Member Noonekamp.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of things that I would like to reiterate. Councilmember Ward, the Mayor Pro Tem, and Member Wright asked this question, and I would like the information about how many of Inglewood's traffic injuries and fatalities are pedestrian, bicycle, motorcycle, or in a car, and the locations of them. Actually, when you're looking at those also, do you have the ability to determine if it was caused by a drunk driver or someone on drugs? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, yes, it is. If the contributing factor was a DUI, that would be listed. We could try to break that out.
Okay. So, because I think there are some things that are already against the law, and if people are violating the laws, it doesn't matter how many traffic calming things we put in if people are driving under the influence. So I think we need that information. The other thing that I would like to look at, I appreciate all the things the other council members have brought up. In our contract with the consultant that we hired in July 18 of 2022, there are a couple of things in there that under the consultant's scope of work. Number one, the preliminary study, they were to evaluate existing traffic and crash data in the corridor to determine the most appropriate traffic calming measures and intersection configurations that will meet the project goal of reducing crashes and providing a safer travel corridor for motorists and pedestrians and bicyclists. We have not gotten that information yet. Do you know when council will be getting that information?
Thank you, Councilman Russell, for the question. To confirm, are we talking about the Hampton Avenue 285 safety study?
No, I think this is the traffic calming study on Dartmouth.
Oh.
Dartmouth Traffic Calming Corridor Project. Then the other thing in that contract under 5E is public outreach. And what it says, they are to develop and implement a strategy and plan for public outreach and education related to the functionality and benefits of the proposed traffic calming modifications. In parentheses, mini roundabout intersection configuration or other recommended improvements for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. The strategy should include a defined process intended to successfully gain public and city council endorsement of the modifications. Public outreach shall inform and educate the public on the benefits and pros and cons of changing from signalized intersections to another configuration. Educating and gaining informed consent from the public. The bottom line is, we haven't got that either, and now we're talking about staff moving forward with these plans. We need to hear from the consultant, and the public needs to be reached out to. There was an article in the Denver Post, I believe, back, I think it was in November or December, where the public had a huge outcry against Denver for approving all the many roundabouts, and the fire department quit approving them. So we need to reach out to the public, because I guarantee you, when the people that live along Dartmouth, and especially the four corners of those intersections, those people will not be able to park in front of their house or on the street on the side of their house. And I don't think it's going to be as easy to convince the public that we should get them. So I think that we need to do a lot of this homework. before we go ahead and move forward, I guess I assumed this is a done deal. It isn't. The consultant hasn't given us the information we need. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your comments and questions there. So yes, we'll follow up with the consultant on the public outreach. I will say the design has been taken into account all four corners to minimize impacts. In addition, including parking, right-of-way take. There's also some improvements. Some of the houses have retaining walls, landscape walls, things like that, trying to minimize that, and at the same time keeping in mind the turning movements that we talked about, and making sure that those are still effective and appropriate given the vehicles going through there. So yes, we will absolutely follow up with the consultant on both of those items.
Thank you.
And Mayor, if I can add.
Sure, go ahead.
Or maybe ask the director, so we aren't to that point in the process where that part of the contract has even started yet, right? On the public outreach, and when will that start?
So we're at the point where that needs to effectively get going, I would say in the next probably 1 to 2 months. We were also going through the process of funding, which has been a huge discussion with the grant to make sure we even have the funding to implement part of the project there. So there's been some engineering refinements. We want to make sure that we're engaging folks and informing them of exactly what is going to happen, how it's going to happen. And so, yeah, we will move that forward.
And I just would like to bring up another thing. I believe the intersection that Councilmember White was referring to is probably Elati and Floyd, because you cannot go straight through, which is very interesting because the fire department that would access that would come down Elati, and they will have to go around to come in from the other direction, because there is no way for the fire department to access that.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. I believe it is Floyd and Elati. So we'll take a look at those design plans and then circle back with the team and trying to understand exactly what discussions happened and what the fire department was privy to.
Thank you.
Member Newnham.
Thank you for the presentation. Been a lot of conversation about this topic lately. And I think, as you know, we had some citizens from the Clayton neighborhood come and talk to us about the school and the traffic in the area. So I'm grateful that you guys have been engaging with that. On your recommended next steps, I see continued engagement with the school district on some of the school safety zones, and also engagement, obviously, with residents and things like neighborhood night out, or whatever, I'm blanking. Neighborhood nights, thank you, I was close. Specifically for residents who are living in the school districts or in those school zones, how are you thinking about engaging with them? And, in your outreach to the school district that you met with them in January, are you also meeting with the residents who came and spoke to us about the questions that they have about that neighborhood?
There are a few residents that we are currently engaged with. I believe some of the ones that came and spoke. We're also coordinating with communications to include some of this information in the water bill. So we're looking for multiple ways to engage with the residents, whether it's social media, printed material, all those methods are on the table for communication and engagement.
Great. I just love to see that kind of a partnership between working with the agency, the school district, but then also working with the residents in the area and making sure that we're hearing kind of like both sides. And then my second question is, excited to see that we're in the next kind of the final phase, hopefully, of the Hawk Crossing on Broadway. We've been talking about it for a while. It looks like we still have about a year to go. Can you just help me understand why it takes so long to do this?
Sure. The particular to that project, we have to get survey out there, including utility locates. We have run into some challenges with some of the utilities and how the design, because we're going to have these arms, traffic signals essentially, hanging over the intersection. Right now, the current design only has one arm because of utility conflicts that crosses the entire road. So it's a very large arm. So we're looking at how that fits into the right-of-way. We want to be aware of multimodal needs, ADA accessibility, making sure that we're not impeding any of that. And then we have to get the design approved. Through, if it's a grant project, CDOT's input, city's input, and then move forward into design documents and then get out to bid. Traffic signal poles, you may recall we brought forward a budget amendment to move money that we had set aside for signal poles in 2023. They took almost 10 months to manufacture and get delivered. They're being installed now. but the manufacturing process also takes a long time, and you don't want to miss. We don't want to order, just as an example, we don't want to order a 50-foot arm, and then we get out into the field and find a utility conflict. So we want to double, triple check, because once that go button is pushed on the order, we are now stuck with that traffic signal pull. So we want to make sure everything is as it should be. We have contingency in place in case we run into conflicts, and everything will fit and work as designed.
Great, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing all that work for our safety.
One last thing I'll add, Excel Energy for the delay. I'll just mention that. So if we need power, we get the Excel factor that we have to deal with.
Slide that one in there. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director, I'll ask a quick question. So I know stop signs are not ideal traffic calming measures, or if you even want to consider them traffic calming measures, but the engineering aspect of it is pretty pricey, right? So I guess my question is, when would we look at additional stop signs in certain neighborhoods that are experiencing increased speeding in lieu of engineering, true engineering traffic calming measures that, maybe hundreds or millions of dollars that we just don't have today? Are we considering those?
Yeah, good question. So we absolutely would look at stop signs. So the city follows the model traffic code for the state of Colorado, which adopts the manual for uniform traffic control devices, also known as the MUTCD. It's a federal document that has a uniform application. That's why all stop signs are red. All yield signs are, triangle. So it's to have that uniformity and consistency throughout the nation. For a multi-way stop, it needs to meet certain criteria and warrants. Same with the traffic signal. We need to have a certain number of vehicles, a certain number of ped crossings. So there's different kinds of warrants that apply to both a stop sign and a traffic signal. So what we would do in that particular instance is we would check the intersection to see if it meet warrants. And then if it does, we would move forward. If it doesn't, we would look for another application. Now, the reason why we have the warrants, and stop signs are actually listed in the MUTCD, there's actually a specific statement that says that they're not used for traffic calming. The reason is, I think Councilmember Ward mentioned auto detection for people that run stop signs. Well, people run stop signs and don't look because there's no conflicting traffic. So if you come up to a four-way stop every day, what happens over time is if you don't have somebody approaching at a right angle, over time you become numb to it, and we see actually increase in accidents. Pedestrians go to cross, they see a stop sign, they see a car coming, they're like, oh, the car's gonna stop, there's a stop sign. Well, if that car's gone through there 100 times and there's never a pedestrian, never another car, they start to build bad habits. And that's one of the reasons for the warrants, is meeting that expectation. And stop signs are there, just like traffic signals, to determine who has the right-of-way. If you arrive first at a four-way stop, you have the right-of-way. If a pedestrian's there and there's a stop sign, technically the pedestrian has right-of-way. So we want to make sure we deploy the right measure for the right issue in the field. Certainly understanding that a stop sign is significantly cheaper than something like a roundabout or chicanes or narrowing, but we do have other things in the toolbox that might be more appropriate, as opposed to a four-way stop not violating the warrants in the MUTCD.
Thank you, Director. Actually, one last question for the chief. In terms of additional tools in your toolbox, photo radar was not in this. I know that this council has talked about it, or not this specific council, but council in the past has looked at photo radar and said no. But is that something that your department would like for us to reconsider or not? I'm actually a proponent of it. I understand the reasons for some members of council being against it, but is that something that would help in certain areas of the city?
Yes, I believe it would. It needs to be very, very strategic and focused at a problem. And, we would absolutely support that if it was rolled out properly and, effectively and at targeted locations specific to whatever the violations are. In this case, they're almost exclusively the speed devices are obviously for speeding vehicles.
Right.
And then there's the red lights. So
Okay, I appreciate it.
we have presented that, you're right, in the past to various councils and
Okay,
city council.
thank you, Chief. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I don't have any more questions, but just in regards to the work that's going on Dartmouth with the design of that project. Thank you, staff, for all the work that's gone into that. We know that from studies and evidence that these kind of the roundabouts slow traffic down, but while allowing it to keep moving, safer per car-to-car interactions and car-to-pedestrian interactions. So this is a move in the right direction. When I look up at the board and see over the last 3 years, 9 deaths. If there's anything we can do to reduce those, then we're on the right track. I think we could do a lot more. Anything we can do to further narrow streets and chicanes. You mentioned chicanes and bulb outs. I know that's the most expensive stuff, but it's all the stuff that works. It's the stuff that slows cars down when the police aren't around to see them. It's the stuff that makes it more natural for cars to go in that under 20 miles per hour range, where if they are going to hit a pedestrian, that pedestrian is likely to not get severely injured or die. And those are the things that we're after. I do think it is possible in Inglewood with the resources that we have to reduce the number of pedestrian and other traffic fatalities. And I think we're on the right track on, we're in the beginning stages, but we're on the right track on it. So thanks for the work you're doing on it. I'm looking forward to seeing the toolbox develop and then an action plan come into place and start slowing the traffic down, because if we're going to save lives, that's the only way to do it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Member Wright and then Member Russell.
Just to add to the mayor, if anyone wants to see how successful photo radar is, go down Federal. Sheridan has it. And they're on Federal every single day, and you don't see that light going off very often because they give the warning and they're down to 35 miles an hour, except for when the school light's on, it's 25, and it's very effective. So it's just something to keep in mind. And if you want to see it at work, head down Federal. So
Is it down by Oxford then, by the school?
Yes,
Okay.
usually south,
Okay.
South of Oxford.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Russell.
Thank you. The one question I have goes back to, I think I asked this, and I don't live over in this area of town, so I haven't checked it. There was a constituent during the campaign that asked about considering I believe it was a 4-way stop sign at Tufts and Irving. Has that been looked into yet?
Yes, thank you for your question. We actually received 2 separate 4-way stop sign requests. That was one. I'm actually expected to have the report this week from our third-party traffic consultant, since we don't have it in-house. But yes, it is being looked into. Data was collected. I believe, unfortunately, there was a slight delay. We use a lot of tubes. So if you see those tubes going across the road, those are basically telling us how many cars go by. And if you see 2 tubes, it'll tell us your speed and the type of vehicle based on the axle spacing. I believe one of the tubes was damaged, so we had to reset. We lost a week. But that is being looked at, and we'll have a response to that council request as soon as that data comes in, and I expect it this week.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Then I would respectfully disagree with the Mayor Pro Tem in the fact that I guess my question is, have we measured the amount of traffic at Logan and Dartmouth and at Downing and Dartmouth during rush hour, in the morning and in the evening? Because during rush hour, when you have traffic going to and from Denver, either the people on Dartmouth are not going to be able to get into the circle at all, or I think the problem is going to be at both areas. So I'm wondering if we need to do a traffic count, especially during rush hour at both of those intersections.
I'll follow up with a consultant. Typically, a traffic study is done, and it's done, we do what's called the peak hour. So you do the morning, and what you do is you measure a 2-hour window, and you take the highest consecutive 15-minute intervals, and you run your analysis based on that. So you're getting kind of the worst of the worst. You'll do it in the morning, you'll do it in the afternoon, and the software that's typically used for this is called Synchro software, and there's another one called VSIM, but it allows us to model the intersections to see the queuing, the delay, with the roundabout, and with a traffic signal, so you can model both of those. I'll confirm, but I believe as part of the data that you requested earlier, that analysis should be in there to show how it's going to function from a level of service. The level of service is based on delay, and the city standard is a level of service D or better, and it's A, B, C, or D. You drop below D, and then your delays are considered pretty significant.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just one other thing. I think what I'm really concerned about is there are some blind people that live over in that area, and the safety. Also, the fact that there are bicycle lanes on Dartmouth, and I'm concerned about that as well. So anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Any further questions from council? I guess I'll bring it up just because right now the direction from council is not to look at photo radars, but since Chief, you said that strategically they could be used, the question I have for council is that would we like the police department to look into where photo radar could be used in the city? We're not saying that we would do it, but just that they provide analysis on where strategically we could provide it. I know it's a sensitive subject for some, so. Member Ward.
Since you asked, I'll answer. There are absolutely positively no circumstances under which I will support photo radar in the city, period.
Thank you, Member Ward. Anyone differ with Member Ward or myself? I'm just looking for 4 yeses at this point, but there's a yes. Member Noonkamp?
I would not vote in support of that, so I wouldn't spend the time researching it.
All right, so anyone, do I have 4 yeses? I guess I don't have 4 yeses based on feedback right now, so. All right, so status quo stays on that item. No further questions from council? Director Rachael, Chief Watson, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Member Wright.
What is people's reasonings why they don't even explore it? I'm new to the game, so I don't understand why people don't.
Does anybody want to jump in on this one? Member
Yeah,
Noonkamp?
you're wanting traffic calming. A van sitting there saying photo radar slows people down. Go to Federal, you'll see it. She's not even an officer. She's got a T-shirt on. I mean...
Go ahead, Member Ward.
My reason is the United States Constitution. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the accused's right to be confronted with the witness against him. A machine cannot be a witness against you, and therefore I do not support any type of photographic enforcement. Tickets for violation of the law should be delivered by sworn law enforcement professionals, as has been the way in the United States of America over the 2+ century history of this great union.
That was his answer 3 years ago as well, so. I don't see any further questions. Thank you very much to the both of you for the presentation. And with that, everyone, we're going to take a 10-minute break. It is 7:31. If we could come back at 7:41. Thank you, everyone. Members of council, if you could please be seated. All right, members of council. Yeah. I don't use it often. All right, everyone, we are now back. We're moving on to agenda item 4. This is the Stormwater Overview. We have the Director of Public Works, Victor Rachael, back, as well as Deputy Director Tim Host, here to discuss the Stormwater Overview. Good evening, Director.
Good evening again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Thank you for having us. So Deputy Director Tim Hoos and myself are going to give you a stormwater program overview for the city. So our program areas in Public Works for stormwater are comprised of 4 separate areas. It's our system maintenance and repair, our planning and prioritization, capital project implementation, and then our program funding. System maintenance and repairs, things that we've done to date with respect to the stormwater system in the city. So repair failed sections of the Oxford Avenue pipe west of Santa Fe has been completed. Clean out accumulated debris in the Oxford pipe, also complete. Repair the existing storm sewer under Jason Court, also known as the Rotolo Park Outlet, has been complete. Complete a system-wide small pipe cleaning program. That is in process, with our second phase of that coming to council soon. Clean out accumulated debris in the North Inglewood area has been completed. And complete a system-wide small system cleaning program and televise the pipes to determine conditions, look for cracks, look for voids, gaps, all those kinds of things. We began that in February of last year and is in progress. We're also looking to build our GIS database, and so we can track our assets, know where they're at, know when we replaced them. That is in process. And then existing pipe repair, as our communications department recently pointed out in their presentation this afternoon, at Oxford and Navajo was just completed. Part of our 2023 system maintenance and repairs, as I just touched on, is having that GIS database. What you see on the screen here is our inventory and condition assessment. It includes inlets, pipes, size of pipes, location, the material they're made from, concrete, steel, corrugated metal, etc. Having that all in our system mapped with tags and GIS data to tell us when we checked it, if we did a repair, when we did it. This is all ways for Public Works to better manage the existing system and make sure that we're on top of maintenance. So our storm drainage funding and staffing, we have 3 different kind of teams here that are funded. So we have our stormwater maintenance program team, headed up by Tyler Gellis, who's our stormwater program manager. He has a stormwater system compliance specialist who helps. And then we have 2 maintenance techs. The maintenance techs operate our vac truck, which recently came through for a budget supplemental. That's cleaning inlets. We found a shocking number of inlets that needed some attention last year. We expect that to be the case moving forward, and then getting into a regular routine maintenance so that we're not playing catch up. Our stormwater engineering program consists of a capital project engineer, and you'll see 1.5 FTE there. That's based on budget. We have a construction inspector that's partially funded from the storm drain fund, and we have a project support specialist that's 3/4 funded out of the fund. Last, we have utility billing. The fund pays for 0.3 of an FTE for billing. Stormwater does go into the billing component as approved in the 2024 budget. We did increase the stormwater billing just slightly. Stormwater maintenance. So as I mentioned, we have two operator positions who are responsible for routine maintenance and repair activities of the system. Those operators run that flush truck, the vac truck, and they have a push camera, so they can do our own inspections in-house. We don't have to rely on a consultant to operate that camera. We're checking inlets, we're checking pipes. If we get concerns of an issue, they can immediately deploy, go check that out. They can clean it, they can jet it, and video it and report back, and then engage the engineering team if we need to. And then if we need to elevate, we also have on-call contracts. We can lean on contractors for more significant projects. In 2023, that team cleaned almost 400 inlets. And they wrapped up right at the end of the rainy season. We did have some changes in staff, unfortunately, so it was paused, but the timing was as good as it could be because the rainy season had just wrapped up. We are currently interviewing for those positions, and actually Tyler Gellis, our program manager, let me know today they hope to get an offer out later this week for one of these successful candidates. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the planning and prioritization of the maintenance and the capital projects, what we've gone through. So you see up here is kind of the order of things as we've developed the stormwater program and started the different capital projects. We started with the stormwater analysis and alternatives feasibility study that was done by Caliber. That was done in 2019, and that I'll go over a little bit more of what that is on the next slide. And then that led into our stormwater master plan, where we were able to prioritize the maintenance and capital projects that we needed to complete to provide the most benefit. And then the maintenance plan, that was kind of a sub thing of the stormwater master plan. We put that in place there. That's all the cleaning and televising and mapping of everything, so we know what we have, where it is, and what the condition is. So then with that, then we went into a partnership with the Mile High Flood District for our citywide major drainageway plan update. We've done a lot of master planning, but this major drainageway plan update, that's required in order to get any funding from the flood district. We have to do a major drainageway plan update participating with them. So they, one of their sponsored consultants runs that and prioritizes that to make sure that the district's spending their money on the most high priority things in the city as well. So that's how we're able to qualify for 50-50 funding from the flood district by having that drainageway plan update. And that's still under development. We're hoping by the summer to have that done. We've had a few bumps in that. Little Dry Creek has been kind of a sub plan of that, and they've had some different results that have come out of that they're looking at to make sure we have the most correct information and can make decisions on how to prioritize things. And then our last, kind of our newest major drainageway plan update is the Dry Gulch, and that's just started the funding on that, and we're hoping to have some initial results on that probably next spring. That's going to be a little longer term. The flood district's got a few other priorities they're working on, and we're definitely in the pipeline, but that'll be coming sooner. We'll have some results of that and where the priorities are for the Dry Gulch and where we need to start spending money to improve the drainage characteristics of that basin up there. And then with that, we'll go to the stormwater alternatives or analysis and alternatives feasibility study. This is that Caliber study I mentioned, kind of the very first study we did to kind of start prioritizing and looking at what needed to be done around the city to improve the storm sewer system. So there's really three purposes of this study. It was the first was that this was done right after the flood of July 2018, where we had the unfortunate death there, and we had them look at a life safety assessment of all flood-prone properties and identify any flood-proofing techniques that would be beneficial to different properties in the city. They also looked at the Oxford pipe condition there, the pipe west of Santa Fe on Oxford there, to see what was going on with that and the sinkholes that had been forming. They gave us a good summary of that and report on what we needed to do there, and that's a project that's recently started there. We'll talk about in a little bit. And then they also they updated the 1999 stormwater outfall system plan. That's the last plan we have with the Mile High Flood District. So that shows you it's getting a little dated there. It's about 25 years old now. So that's why we had them look through that and try to prioritize and update things. And they did give us some good ideas on what to focus on. But then we now have this new master plan program going with the flood district to update that plan with new basically they're updating the hydrology, which is how much water is getting to every inlet and different basins in the city, so we can understand, make sure we're designing to the right flows and we're not using outdated information, make sure we design for what we need and we don't over-design or under-design or anything like that. So that's what that study was really about. Then when you go into the Stormwater Master Plan, that's something we had Hazen, there's a consultant named Hazen that did that for us. They took the caliber work and then turned that into a master plan of not only the capital projects, but also the maintenance projects. So we had the asset management, the GIS inventory and all that kind of stuff was recommended in there. That's the stuff we started on that Director Rachael talked about there. And then the prioritized list of system improvements is, we'll go through that here in a minute, kind of all the different capital projects and why we started with those. That was the things identified in this master plan that led us to what we needed to do first. So these are the different projects that the master plan recommended. These are kind of a subset of what Caliber came up with. These mostly focused in the South Englewood Basin is what we found. That basin there was probably the most severely deficit, I guess, as far as stormwater infrastructure that needed to be completed to make sure the water stayed in the right of way and made its way to the creek without flooding anybody out. So we do have those first 5 projects there are all underway. We've got the South Englewood Basin segment 1 and 2, that's the Oxford outfall pipe, as well as the new detention pond that we're currently just started the construction on. Those 2 projects there are underway. Then we had the segment 3A and 3B there. Those are the upper part of the South Englewood Basin there in the Acoma area. Those have both been completed there. I've got a listing here of the ones that have been done, but those are done. Then the segment 4 there, that's another upper South Englewood one that's planned for next year. So these first 5 projects really are where we kind of focus the funding at. I'll go through the funding a little bit here too, and how we got all the funding to build all these projects. We had to go through a process as well for that to make sure we had funding to get all these things that were recommended in the master plan. So I'll take a look at that and kind of show you how we got the funding as well. So this is kind of the process we've followed to get to our implementation of our projects. As I mentioned, we went through the hydraulic and hydrologic analysis. So the hydrologic analysis is more the analysis of how much rain is getting or how much water is getting to each point, so we understand how big of a pipe or an inlet we need at each location. And hydraulic is more designing the pipe for that much water. Then we did the system analysis. That's more of the overall system performance there and how it all functions together. And then we did the preliminary engineering for this mostly relates to the South Englewood Basin there, those priority projects from the master plan. We went through the cost estimating and alternatives analysis, and then we selected the projects. That's how we kind of went through the process to select the pond option for the South Englewood Basin there. We looked at the parallel pipes or some way to upsize the Oxford pipe and settled on the pond option there as the most cost effective. And then once we had that, then we went into the funding that I'll go over here in a little bit. And once we knew how much funding we needed, we were able to secure that and finally be able to start the final design as well as the construction. And we've got those underway now. So I'll go over that here and kind of summarize the different projects and where we're at with all the things we've done to date. But as we talked about here, we did the first project is the caliber study. Then we looked at based on that caliber study, it recommended the South Englewood Oxford outfall was probably our highest priority. And so we looked at that and what we can do to either upsize that pipe or do an alternative alignment, or what we ended up settling on was the pond option there. So that's led us into the design of those projects there. We actually ended up lining the Oxford pipe, and that's underway as we speak. Actually, it's going to be started here pretty quick, and then we ended up with the pond upstream to not have to upsize that pipe. So that's kind of how those alternatives went, and then the design came together on those. So the construction of S1 and S2, the Oxford outfall as well as the pond, that started late last year, and we at this point, I still expect to be done by the end of this year with both of those projects, the pond and the lining of the Oxford pipe. So then we've also got the S3A and B. Those are the upper South Englewood, Acoma area projects. Those have been completed. The design's been done for a while, obviously, but the construction of those was done in 2021 and 2022. Those both got done. Those were probably the two highest priority projects we had. That's why they were some of the first ones done first. We got those completed and were able to make some pretty good improvements in that area. And then the next one there, the project S3C and 4, those are two other Upper South Englewood projects that are not quite as high a priority. So the reason those are waiting till 25 is we wanted to make sure we had enough money to build the pond and the lining the Oxford pipe, because we knew we had to do those first with the funding, and we couldn't be short of funding on those. So that's the S3C and S4 is intended for next year, once we kind of settle our how much funding we have for future projects there, and be able to make sure we can get those installed. And then we've also got what's called the hospital project. That was the other priority project. That's the Old Hamden between Clarkson and Lincoln. Basically, there's a section of storm sewer pipe there that's undersized, that's causing some flooding on Old Hamden. That was identified in the master plan as a priority to get done. It's high traffic area, we got the hospital there and stuff. That was one we definitely identified as something that needs to be repaired, so the hospitals can continue to function and not get flooded out in heavy rain events. And then, so the intention of that one, we're almost done with the design, and we intend to begin construction on that this summer. That'll probably be our next project out to bid, is that hospital project there. That's, plans are just about complete on that, and we're getting ready to go to bid on that. And I think we've got just enough funding left to build that one as well. So then these minor improvement projects, that's another, kind of show you on the future slide here on the budget there. That's more of a kind of ongoing in the future. Once we get the system evaluated and we look at the condition of the pipes and the, the different inlets and things, if we need to make some spot localized improvements, that's what those will be for, to be able to identify those areas that need to be, either the pipe needs to be replaced, or we need to do a localized upgrade to inlets and things, just to make an improvement in a focused area of the city. Here's a little summary of the project S3 and S4. These are those ACOMA projects that we talked about. These were the first two projects that we got done. So as you see on this map here, these were a lot of spot locations that we identified for improvements here. What we did is we had, once we had the recommendation that this area needed to be improved and the lines were too small, we had a consultant go through and actually do that hydrologic analysis. They looked at how much water gets to every single inlet in this area, and how if we needed bigger inlets, if we needed bigger pipes, where the bottlenecks were. And this is what they came back with. They were able to really help us focus on specific areas that needed improvements. And you've got these are kind of actually all of the list there is prioritized by the areas that were the highest priority. Obviously, the Acoma Street area there, number one, was one of our biggest problem areas. That low spot there was collecting water, so we upsized that. Was one of the first projects we did. And then that area 2 on Broadway, the low point on Broadway there, just east of Acoma there, that was another bottleneck that we were able to open up those inlets and really make some big changes there and some positive results there to get the water in the pipe and flowing through the pipe rather than across the private properties there. So we worked our way through all those different numbers there, and we've I think it's the first 6 are done now, and I think the last 3 or 4 there are the S3C and S4 as they're called there. Those will be the ones next year that we'll look at doing, but they're just not quite as high a priority as the others. So we've held off once again to make sure we had funding to get the pond built and the Oxford lining, because those were our high dollar items. We needed to make sure we had funding to get those done. Didn't want to run short. So that's the kind of what we did in the Acoma area. And then you've got here's kind of the future project list here. I'll kind of explain kind of our strategy as we move into future years. So you see 2024, we've got 21.6 million we're planning to spend, and that's all the pond and the Oxford pipelining and all that stuff is, that's where those big dollars are coming from there. We've got to get that done. And then as you see, as we go into future years there, we've basically the 2 projects we have funded for future years going 5 years out are the repair and rehabilitate the existing system, and that's going to be based on the results we get from the televising and the inspection and cleaning of the pipes. It'll tell us which pipes are damaged and need to be repaired. So the point of that is to avoid sinkholes and surprises. We don't want to be getting phone calls, there's a hole in the street, and find out our storm sewer has a hole in it. We'll know where those holes are and be able to go fix them before they become an emergency situation where we have to make unscheduled improvements or repairs. So that's what that funding will be for. And then the small area drainage improvements, that's more for the localized areas where we maybe just need to upsize an inlet or replace a section of pipe, make it bigger to make it drain better. And that's really more localized improvements that we can do to make a difference in a certain street rather than a big basin like we're doing now. And then the other 2 projects we have funded for the future years are the money that we're going to get from the flood district, that 50/50 money. We wanted to capitalize on that the best we can. So the flood district was able to get us this much funding, so we prioritized as much money as they can get us. We'll try to match that so we can increase our dollar value as best we can. And those two projects will be focused on the South Englewood area. Once again, the master plan is looking at that area to make sure we've got everything in that area that we need done. Otherwise, we can use that funding anywhere in the city. That funding is reserved for the city. So if we do find a different area from that master plan that's a higher priority, we can transfer that funding to there if we need to. And then the Dry Gulch, Harvard Gulch is the other 50-50 project we've got with the flood district, where they're able to fund quite a bit of that and help us out on that. So those two are our future, probably our larger projects for the future years. We'll be working with the flood district, and then these smaller ones will be our kind of in-house designs that we're able to fund those. But the issue as the future years go out, the funding, as I'll show you, the funding we had to get for these big improvements, there's obviously loan payments and bond payments we've got to make, and that really, in future years, it really limits our ability to spend too much on capital in the storm sewer system until those are paid off. So I'll kind of show you that here and kind of how that money plays out. So here's kind of the different sources of funding that we got for all this work. The first little piece was a loan from the general fund. Actually, before we'd raised the stormwater rates, we got a little bit of a loan there to start some of these things and get some of these initiatives going. And when we got that, we were actually working on the stormwater rate study at the same time to understand how much the rates had to increase to be able to afford these improvements that were recommended. And then, so once we got the study, then we increased the stormwater rates over the last 4 years. We've done that to get enough funding to do this work. So we did look at state and federal grant opportunities, and unfortunately, we did not get the FEMA grant. We submitted for that, and it did not come through, but we definitely gave it a good effort there. But so what we ended up having to do was we issued $10 million in bonds, and that's our annual payment over 25 years. That 540 is the amount we've got to pay back every year for 25 years on that. So that's that, as well as the stormwater loan there, the $25 million loan we got, it's about $1.6 million a year we've got to pay back. So it's between those two, it's about $2.16 million every year we've got to pay back in the stormwater fund. So that really limits our amount of capital projects we can do until those are paid off, and that's why we have these smaller projects moving forward. That's really what the budget can accommodate there while we're paying for these larger improvements. So let's see, I was gonna go back here too. The other thing on these small drainage improvements, we've considered as well, we've seen a lot of those localized areas where it's just a single property or a certain house or location that's lower than the street, or it's got issues on the property that would be more cost effective to repair than trying to improve the right of way in the city's drains and stuff. So we've considered maybe allocating, $50,000 or so towards something like that, where we would help individual property owners improve their own property rather than having the city pay to, dig up the street and replace all the pipes and inlets, and then still not be sure that we can keep the water out of their property just because of the way they're sitting, or their house is too low, or their window wells are too low, or their grading's just kind of off, where it's more cost effective to work on the private property than in the right of way. So we've thought about possibly allocating some of that funding towards that, just because it would be cheaper than any kind of work we could do in the right of way. We definitely wanted to get some feedback from council tonight, if that's something you would be interested in possibly investing a small amount on private property where it's appropriate to be able to kind of be more cost effective to repair some of these localized problems that we're seeing there, because it's tough when you have just one or two houses that are affected there. It's sometimes easier just to go to that property and kind of assist them, and some different improvements they can do to protect their property and keep the water from entering their homes or their basements or whatever. So we've looked at that, and we definitely like to get some feedback from council if that's something you'd be interested in, maybe having a program like that where we could maybe do some improvements like that rather than always just looking at the city's infrastructure. We can maybe do some grading work and things on private property to improve some of those situations that we have from time to time. So with that, I think that's everything we've got, and we'll answer any questions or anything you have on what we've been doing and where we're at to date.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Deputy Director, for the presentation. I guess members of council, if you want to also weigh in on what was the item called the small area drainage improvements. I may have a question on that, but Member Ward, kick us off with questions.
This may just be a terminology thing, but tonight I've seen a term that I think I've not seen before, which is catch basin. And it seems to be being used sometimes with inlet and sometimes not. Are they synonymous? I see some slides that refer to catch basins and some that refer to inlets. What differentiates the two?
So yes, I apologize for any confusion there. So inlets typically would have a grate And sometimes they have what's called a hood. So it's like an opening in the curb as well in addition to that. Catch basins, I guess if you were to look up a standard detail, would be more of a curb opening inlet only and not have the grate. Typically, that could be like a concrete lid with a curb opening. I would say in Inglewood, the vast majority of our storm drains are what I would call an inlet with a grate, and probably 50% or better have what's called the hood with them at the same time.
Okay, so it just, to put it in layman's terms, it kind of summarizes the features that each of them have?
Correct, yes.
The way they're constructed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, secondly, regarding your last question, I support grants to individual homeowners if we believe that we can resolve the situation without causing problems for the neighbors. I know water has to go somewhere, and if I keep it off my lot, there's a chance that my neighbor on either side would be adversely affected by that, and I want to make sure that we're not paying for someone to cause a problem for someone else.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. I would agree. So we're looking at kind of like a little mini grant for this. And the work would actually be done by the homeowner or the homeowner's contractor. The city would kind of vet through the process what's being done, to your exact point, to make sure we're not making a situation worse for the adjacent property owner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Russell, then Member Wright.
Thank you. So I've been on council 8 years and I've really never seen this before, but maybe it's because I've heard so many things now I have more of a perspective that the Stormwater Utility and Enterprise Fund was established in the year 2000. Do you know if that was a result of the 1999 study that was done because there was flooding?
I do not know, Tim.
Yeah, that predates me as well. It's an interesting question. I'd be interested to know as well. The timing most likely lines up with, more than likely, the flood district had their new master plan down, and in order to implement that, the city needed a designated funding source to be able to do some of that. So I don't know for sure, but I would assume that's more than likely what happened.
Okay, I appreciate that. That would be something interesting for us to see.
Okay.
And really how this really kind of worked out, and because I know there are some citizens that think this has gone on way too long, but I'd appreciate that. Then also on the slide about the projects S3 and S4, there is some bigger numbers like 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do those indicate the size of the pipes? You may need to go back a couple of slides. Yeah, back forward now. That one right there. So where you see those numbers, do those indicate the size of the pipes? Or does that just mean they made them larger and they fixed the bottlenecks?
Yeah, I'm not sure it really relates to any size of pipe. I think it's just more for visual clarification there. I don't think it's necessarily showing that the pipes were made larger necessarily. I think it's just more that's the general project area and the kind of where their work can be at. There's no correlation between the size of the box and the pipe, but at least I'm not aware of that's how this was prepared. I think it was more to show the different areas that were being worked on.
Okay. I mean, because if they actually made them bigger and that's a relative picture, then they've created more bottlenecks. So if that's just highlighting where they've fixed the problems, that's great. The other question that I have is the properties on Acoma Street that are in the bottom of the hill on both sides, the middle of the block. Have we been working with any of those people to address their problems? Because every time it floods, it seems like that's where the water collects.
Great question. Yes, we have. I've personally walked the property with the homeowner, in addition to City Manager and Councilmember Ward. We looked at the alley behind that particular property. We talked about potential options. Should a grant be available? We also talked about there already is a grant for flood repairs, which that homeowner applied for due to the rain event this past summer. We are engaged with Excel Energy to trim trees in the alley to remove vegetation that could potentially clog the inlet. Actually was able to connect with them today to follow up, so we anticipate tree removal hopefully in the next month to mitigate the inlets in the alley being clogged. So to answer your question, yes, we are engaged at the moment just with that particular homeowner. The homeowner on the west side of the street during this past summer's rain event did not experience, to my knowledge, any flooding inside their home. They had localized flooding in their yard, which was alleviated by opening their back gate and allowing the water to flow to the alley to their west, which also has a concrete pad and inlets for the water to get into the storm pipe.
And so were they on the west side of the street, were they okay? Because they were pretty devastated after the flood in 2018, I think it was. So I just want to make sure that we take care of them because that's where loss of life occurred.
Yes.
And I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think maybe part of the problem is too the design of the door in the basement apartment, because once that stairwell fills up with water, you can't get out.
That's a valid point. The homeowner, and this has been a few months, has made improvements herself to the home where the individual passed. She has installed, I'll call it a riser curb. So she's actually raised the lip so the water can't go down the stairs as easily. Before that was flush with the ground. And the home was actually, it feels like, and I haven't seen any survey data, but it feels like it's a low point. So that homeowner added, I want to say it was like 4 inches of concrete. A contractor did it to help prevent water from going down the stairs. She also installed, we noticed this summer when we were on site immediately following the rain event, there was a sump drain that was not functioning. She has installed a sump pump in that drain that will now push the water back out over the stairs away from her property. So this homeowner has made a number of improvements to prevent that. I believe she was looking at the door swing. I don't recall if that's been addressed, but all these items are in motion.
Okay, I appreciate that. And in which case, I am all for giving substantial grants. But we want to make sure there may be other areas of town that didn't get as much attention
Sure.
as that area did. But definitely, I want to take care of those properties there.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I concur with the grants. Where I live, there are 2 houses that are the 2 original houses in my area of town. And one of the houses flooded a couple of times, and they do not have a basement, but because of where they sit. So they've had some issues, and I think they'd be very interested in some help on trying to flood-proof their one and only level of their house. Okay, I had a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's going to be helpful when we have the town hall. So I guess that would be one of my questions. Have we thought about when in the future that we are looking at a date for a town hall for the public to let them know where we're at with everything?
So I guess that would be one thing that would be great feedback from council tonight is agreement in holding the town hall. We have not selected a date per se, but certainly flexible and prepared to do that. Location also could be a point of discussion, whether it's here or I don't know, maybe Malley or Rec Center. So there's a number of things out there. We have talked about a potential format and currently leaning more towards kind of an open house with a short presentation in the beginning and then allowing people to move about the meeting room to talk about various aspects of the drainage improvements that the city has made, whether it's the projects that are complete, whether it's the studies, the drainage studies, could be the regional pond that's just now getting going. Could be minor drainage improvements, things like that we have going on. So we have started putting some thought into kind of a format for a town hall drainage presentation.
Okay. The Oxford pipe you're talking about, I guess I need a little bit clarity on that. I hear Oxford pipe, I think about at Santa Fe, and I know that's not what you're talking about. So I guess,
So it's the S1 on this map here on the right. That's the Oxford outfall pipe we're talking about there in the kind of the teal blue in the left side of the exhibit there.
okay, is it the one for the retention pond or?
So that, it's the actual, the pipe coming, that drains the detention pond. Yeah, that little laser there, that's the one it's the one just west of Santa Fe that drains the basin there. It drains the south basin as well as the south central basin. That's our combined outfall pipe that goes to the Platte River there. So that's the Oxford outfall. That's the pipe that's getting lined. That'll be lined rather than replaced. And then the other pipes are adequate after we get the pond in. The other pipes can handle the flow coming out of the pond, so we've,
So it is not at Santa Fe, or is it before where the break was that you had to fix?
it's just downstream of that break, actually.
Yeah. So it goes under Santa Fe there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where they've been doing all the work recently
Yeah,
on the west side of Santa Fe.
Yeah,
Correct.
They're cleaning out the
Okay.
pipe, yeah, that's where
Okay.
they're getting ready to put that liner in. Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing I learned that was interesting about that section is that the part that was replaced when we did all of the work after the sinkhole, that has all been basically completely reconstructed. So it's all new pipe through that intersection to where they connect it and then take it out. Where we had the sinkhole in 2019, that was in Sheridan, but it was our pipe. All of that is what's being lined. And something that I think has been a little bit lost is the fact that this lining is a thick epoxy that makes a smooth pipe where it's now a corrugated pipe. It really is essentially like a new pipe, for the next 50 or more years, that will really last. And more water can go through that smooth pipe than could go through the slightly larger corrugated pipe, just because of the physics of water and how it moves, past structures. So I don't want to lose the fact that, we're lining a pipe. This is a major, major expense, number one, for the stormwater fund, but it's also a major improvement to the overall system.
Right. Okay, and then now I keep hearing Oxford because also, where is Dry Gulch? Is Dry Gulch and Harv Gulch the same area?
Dry Gulch's right at the top there, that's where the part's in Englewood, and then that part outlets into Platte River through Denver, but that's all Dry Gulch right up there. That's our northerly basin there.
Okay, so when it comes time to fix that area, we're gonna have to work in conjunction with Denver to do that, correct?
That's correct. The flood district's working with Denver. That's why we're combining with the flood district to make sure we're all on the same page with what's getting done, and that we don't make improvements to our section that Denver's section can't handle. We want to make sure if we do something that Denver's section will be able to accommodate whatever we do, and we won't, just back
Okay,
it up.
because
So.
when I've talked to people, they're like, it wasn't a big priority for Denver, so maybe they're wanting to fix
And
their
a lot
stuff
of, a lot
now.
of the Denver section's an open channel, so they've got a lot more capacity than we do. All of ours is closed in. We don't have any open channel really at all, so Denver's part definitely has more capacity than ours, so we just don't want to over-design ours to where, Denver's section can't handle that. We want to make sure they're, no sense making a pipe bigger than you can, put downstream. So we're coordinating with them to make sure that does all flow together, and we'll get to the creek, and we won't be spending money that, we're not getting the benefit from.
Okay, and then if you had to guess how many homes were prone to, I would say, water damage or flooding or whatever, what would you guess it would be between the possible Lacoma and the one I know of? I mean, that's 2. Would you say it's less than 10 or?
From this past summer? Yeah, I would say from the events this past summer, it's less than 10. I would venture to say it's probably in the 4 to 6 range.
Okay, and is that based on when we were given those $5,000 grants, people that applied for, or just knowledge of?
Both. We did have a number of folks apply for the flood restoration, and that coupled with kind of what we saw and what we heard, and similar to what you've heard from your neighbors.
Okay, all right. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Really good news, I think, to see all this work that's been done over the last 4 years. We've made a lot of progress. Still got a lot on the master plan list, and that's kind of part of my question here is you mentioned that due to the kind of the debt service obligations and the stormwater fund, we don't have a lot of money to take on big projects. Are the remainder of these things on the stormwater master plan significant projects that we're just going to have to postpone, or either that or consider another large increase to the stormwater fund? What are kind of our options in terms of continuing forward with the master plan?
So yeah, the idea is this initial, surge of money is to get the high priority stuff. And then the idea would be once that's paid off, we would go after that South Central and the Central Basin and those types of things. Based on the master plan, those aren't nearly the high priority as the South Inglewood Basin was. That basin was had some severe problems that need to be handled soon. But the idea would be, there's basically two options. Either raise the rates more, which are already, our rates are we had to raise them pretty good to get where we're at now. So if we raise them more, we're going to be really pushing that. So the idea would be, in 20 to 25 years, we start planning for these next improvements. And then once those bonds and the loan are paid off, we go after another bond or loan to fund that next big surge of work that needs to be done in the future, it's a few years out, but it's nothing that, after we looked at things, it's not really anything that needs to be done right away. It can wait for that next, cycle of paying off the loan and the bonds to be able to then go after some of those bigger projects once again. And in the interim, we'll be doing the, improving the existing pipes and looking at any localized things that are causing problems. And we do have some funding to do, localized stuff. We just can't do these big, giant regional pond and stuff. Those are just such enormous costs there. It's difficult to do more than one of those every few years when you get the funding together. It's just a very big commitment there. So we as that's paid off, the rates will still be there to be able to fund a new bond or a new loan in the future. As the time comes due, there we'll be able to do that.
What's the need on SC1 and SC2? The pipes don't need replaced there. They need lined, or new inlets. What are we looking at potentially there?
So that is similar to the South Inglewood Basin. It's not nearly as bad, but the trunk lines are a little bit undersized. So we either need to look at some more detention or upsizing the trunk lines. They're not nearly as undersized as those South Inglewood ones were, and what we had to do in South Inglewood to get that all to work together right. The South Central is, like I say, it's not. And the repercussions of that overflowing are not nearly as much as the South Inglewood Basin. Most of that flows into the right of way, and it'll stay in the street. Even if it overflows, it's not going into somebody's property. So that's where we've got some time there. But it is more the trunk lines is what was looked at there and how big those need to be. So more than likely, what we do is do similar to what we did in the South Inglewood Basin, have a consultant look at every inlet in that basin and every pipe and verify which ones are really causing the problem. And then hopefully we can knock some of those off in the more recent years. Upsizing the entire trunk line doesn't necessarily solve every problem. If all the water just went to the trunk line, that'd be one thing, but it goes through inlets and pipes to get there. So more than likely, we'll look at doing a very localized study of that to see where the bottlenecks are and what we can do right now with the funding we have. We certainly won't sit on that. We'll be looking at that to make sure we can do what needs to be done in the interim to make sure we can improve it as best we can and get rid of as many bottlenecks as we can. But the rest of those basins aren't nearly as extreme situation as the South Inglewood Basin was. That South Inglewood was a lot of bottlenecks and problems there, just inlets undersized and things that really needed to be handled quickly. But these other ones are. We feel confident with the funding we have in the future, we can do some of that and be able to take care of some of those areas and not just focus on the South Inglewood Basin, because it has taken a lot of funding to get that South Inglewood Basin where it needs to be, and we're look to the future now for these other basins, but they're not nearly as extreme as what we've accomplished so far.
Is there some ability to accumulate funds after paying debt service and kind of maintenance and our different programs to make sure the pipes are clean? With some amount of funds that we're going to continue to accumulate so that we can spend those?
Yeah, so kind of what we've looked at here, that's where these budget numbers came from. We looked at based on the debt service, we've got about $650,000 a year we feel comfortable that we can use for capital improvements in future years. The rest of it's got to go to the maintenance and salaries and all the standard operating cost for a storm drainage fund, but we do 650. It's obviously not a huge amount, but it's enough where we feel confident we can do some improvements as needed. And the key is to focus it on the areas that really need it and make sure
Yeah.
we if there's a certain isolated area, we can spend it all there. That really helps to make the money go further.
Very good. And the last thing is I'm supportive of the private property improvements for flood reduction there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to caution us because back in 2014, which was before I got on city council, the North Englewood Basin was very problematic. They did studies. They were going to have to upgrade all the pipes. They did not have the money to do it at that time. And part of the problem was Denver had to fix Harvard Gulch before we could do our part. I think what happens is wherever the rain comes is the area of the city that gets the attention. And fortunately, there hasn't been a problem over there in the last couple of years. But I think we need to not get overconfident because if we have rainstorms over there, we can have problems there too. So that's really all I wanted to share. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's part of that dry gulch money, why we're putting money away for that dry gulch up, because you're exactly right. They did that master plan. It's like $60 million worth of work, and we're not going to do 60 million. So that's where we're trying to get that study done to know where exactly do we need to do work to make this thing work the best it can, where are properties vulnerable up there. And that's why we definitely have allocated funding towards that to make sure we continue that effort and do what we can up there, because that definitely was something I recognized when I got here. There's some needs up there as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's a great point, Member Russell. Completely agree with you on that point. So any further questions from members of council? I don't see any, but it does sound like we are going to be having a town hall. I think I'm definitely in support of it. And it just sounds like there's just a little bit of it, just trying to figure out the scheduling for that aspect of it. I'd be, I'm up for doing something in March because I know that you have a town hall coming up next week possibly, but yeah, getting that on the calendar, and I'm happy to do it at the rec center or Malley. Rec center seems to make more sense just because it's in the area that we're discussing. So, Member Russell, go ahead.
I just would like to make a comment about the town hall, and when you're planning it, the one thing that frustrates citizens a lot is to divide them out. And I think a lot of times when one person can ask a question and the whole crowd can hear the question and the answers to the question, it eliminates a lot of the frustration and maybe a lot of the questions also. So I think that's something that we ought to consider when we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Perfect. All right. And with that, Deputy Director Host, Director Rachael, thank you very much for the presentation, and looking forward to continuing the conversations here over the next month or so with the town hall. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the last agenda item for tonight. This is Deputy City Manager Tim Dodd here to discuss recommendations on proposed modifications to the city's existing contract processes. And I would
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'm joined by two special guests tonight, our Interim Finance Director, Kevin Ingalls, and our Procurement Supervisor, Trudy Peepgrass. I do want to thank tremendously Trudy, who is a leader in the industry. I think she's Vice President, as you found out last week, of the President, sorry for that emotion, of the statewide organization dedicated to procurement. So we're very lucky to have her expertise, and also wanted to thank Tyson Thornburg, who is our Finance and Budget Analyst, who worked with both Trudy and I to do this presentation. So for two of you, you were not on council when the last time we talked about this. The other five of you were. So just as a reminder and a refresher, we did, two of the former council members, specifically former member PJ Kolnek, brought up in, I think I want to say late October, early November, the idea of having a study session on contract thresholds and some other parts of the procurement process. And so on November 20th, the week of Thanksgiving, we came before you with a study session, and I believe it was a pleasure of council for us to come back one more time with one final study session that also included staff recommendations. So the first time time that this was before you, it did not include recommendations, but it does today based on the research that Trudy Tyson and I have done. So really what we were trying to balance, our desired outcome, was to balance two things. Number one, the desire for efficiencies and effectiveness in our processes, while also ensuring appropriate checks and balances throughout the process. We have three recommendations for you to consider this evening. The first two are interconnected, and the third one's a little bit different. So the first one is we are recommending that we separate and consider having two different contract thresholds for approval, one for contracts that are budgeted and one for contracts that are not budgeted. So the first recommendation is a threshold of $125,000 for non-budgeted contracts. The second one is a separate, and I'll go over in detail why we came to this proposal. This requested, you didn't request this specifically, but you requested a recommendation. The second one is focused on budgeted contracts for $250,000 and over. And the third one focuses on some details related to the purchase order process, which is really more internal, but I believe it would require council discussion and decision for us to modify this, so that's why it's before you tonight. So a little bit of background, so just so we're all on the same page, contracts that are less than 10,000 are approved internally in departments by directors. Contracts between 10,000 and 100,000 are approved by the city manager. Anything over 100,000 right now does go before you. The last time that was changed, just for the way of background, was 2019. Approval of funding as part of the budgetary process and related contracts are two separate council actions. This is something that former member Kolnick did bring up, and I have some data to show you that was also in your packet that does show that in many cities, not all, but many cities in our region, they are connected. So the action of council, your authority, obviously, as the controllers of the city budget, is interrelated with your approval over contracts. And then just as a reminder, the $100,000 contract threshold is per vendor per year. So just to show you some trends, so this is from 2020 to now. I think those of you who were on council before did see this slide. I think, I think it's interesting just to show the number of contracts that we have. So obviously 2023 is a little bit outdated now just because it was old data, as a lot of the contracts for the last quarter just wrapped up in the last few weeks. But so we had in 2020, there were 36 contracts that went to you, 28 in 2021, and then 86, tremendous jump in 2022, and then 58 in 2023. This is to show you just some data from other cities in the region that, again, we've been over before. So there are at least three that we're aware of. And Littleton, actually, as a caveat, they did actually add a threshold of 500,000 relatively recently. But Greenwood Village, which is less than half our size, does not require that any contracts go to council for approval. Thornton, the same thing. And then there's some that have caveats. Wheat Ridge, Lone Tree is equal to us. Wheat Ridge is below us, and they're roughly our size. And then Sheridan, which is substantially lower, does have a $50,000 threshold, but that's only for contracts without budgetary authority. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is the amount of time that staff spends specific to contracts that come to you. So obviously a lot more time than this goes into contracts. So this doesn't account for the development of contract materials in the departments. It does not account for the city attorney's office time, which is substantial. It does not include for Trudy and finance department's time, which is also substantial. So we've estimated that contracts that go to you roughly, and this is again an estimate, it varies tremendously, but on average, they're about 16 hours on top of the regular time that's spent developing contracts. So 1 hour in the finance department to review budget authority, up to 1 hour for the city clerk's office for their collation, copying, and printing. They're reviewed by either or sometimes both City Manager Lewis and I, or one of us, at least one of us. And then they also, the bulk of the time is from the initiating department. So it was actually Director Rachael and his department that were the guinea pigs with this. And so he and his team, specifically the engineering group, did an analysis, and they each looked at their different hours. They looked at various past contracts, and they estimated that about 13 hours were involved in this process. That does not include the time that goes when they are presented before council. So the first recommendation is increasing the threshold of non-budgeted contracts to 125,000. Just a few key things on this. As a reminder, we did look, and 2019 is when it was increased to 100,000. We wanted to be strategic about this recommendation, or all the recommendations, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't just picking a random number. And so the number that we've come up with is based on the CPI, which is obviously tied to inflation. So what we did is we looked at the inflation changes every year for the past 5 years, and based on that, we're recommending $125,000 for non-budgeted contracts. And again, it wasn't just a random increase, it was one that was based on inflation that we rounded up from 124 and change to 125. So the recommendations in this one really are to change and make a contract threshold that is for $125,000. And again, looking at the Denver, Aurora, Lakewood Consumer Price Index, which again is tied to inflation, it would be 124,000 and change. And again, the last time it was changed was in 2019 as Ordinance 14 of that year. So our rationale for this change, there's a couple things. One is that we wanted a strategic approach, one that wasn't, again, a random number, but one that was tied, in this case, to inflation. What also, the goal is that reducing the percentage of contracts that are required to go through the process of developing memos and other documents would be approximately 17% based on past data from past years, and it would obviously, hopefully, reduce some staff time, as you saw in that estimate. The second recommendation is to create a $250,000 threshold for budgeted contracts. Again, this one is based on research that we did in some other cities. So the recommendation is really to have a threshold that's explicitly for contracts that have been budgeted for. There are several cities that have programs like this, and some have their own checks included. So in Centennial, a resolution is taken to council basically each year, right at the end of the year, beginning of the year, pre-authorizing certain agreements if they're known and covered in the budget. In Greenwood Village, once it's approved, the city manager approves all expenditures and contracts except IGAs. And then in Sheridan, as I mentioned previously, anything over $50,000 that is budgeted or brought to council for authorization if they're not funded. Reasons for this recommendation is that we believe it will create efficiencies by reducing the number of contracts that require the development of communications and going to you, and just overall it would reduce the number of contracts that we need to bring to you. The thing that's mentioned in the first bullet there relates to, there are sometimes, and Director Rachael could speak to this directly, it was his department that brought this up, but there are cases where we may want to go after grant funding for matching grants, and sometimes the timeline of having to go to council does delay it, especially around the holidays or times when the meeting schedules do change. And I'm fine covering this unless you want to, because you're... Okay, I'm going to try my best, but you're the expert on this one. So this is the third one, which again is a little bit, I'll take a little bit more time here to kind of go over the background of it. This would, as my understanding is, would need to go to you also, which is why we're bringing it to you today, because it does impact the procurement policies. But this is really a process of what we do internally. So this is really for things that are below $100,000. And so what we're recommending is approval of purchase orders that would be given to a deputy director, budget and procurement separately. Right now, directors need to approve a memo for the purchase of an item. They need to sign the contract and then approve the purchase order. So that the director themselves, they're having 3 different touch points. They're doing things that we think could be done by a deputy in the case that there is a deputy. And I think in the memo I outlined the percentage of departments that have a deputy or equivalent. And then also engaging budget and procurement, 2 divisions in finance department for those reviews. It would streamline the process as the deputy director would approve the memo and sign the contract. The budget division would ensure that there's funding for it, and the procurement division would review the procurement justification. This would create and have essentially the checks and balances that we want and desire, but it would spread them out again, across 3 different people. But it would also alleviate a lot of the work that directors are doing, and a lot of this work is already being done by procurement and by budget, and so we don't believe it would be any additional work. Approximately 80% of purchase orders are less than the $100,000 limit, and in our analysis, 15 to 20% of purchase orders greater than $100,000 equate to approximately 75 or 80% of the purchase order time spent. Our rationale for this recommendation is that, and this is based on Supervisor Peepgrass's engagement with the the statewide procurement organization. Inglewood does remain the only known city in Colorado. There aren't any others that are in the association that we're aware of that requires directors and the city manager to approve purchase orders. So this recommendation would align Inglewood with other cities in the area, and then it would also ensure that department reviews by the deputy, budget availability, and procurement would remove duplication of the director approval and would definitely streamline the process and remove the amount of time that directors have to spend on this. There's a lot of process duplication here. So our request is really that you review these 3 proposals and effectively let us know if there's any that you want us to move forward on. Again, today was a little bit different than the last one because you had requested that we come back to you with recommendations, which is what we did. And so now we'd like your guidance and your advice. And if you do have any direction to move forward, the next steps would be ordinances or resolutions that would be able to change these policies if you would like us to do so. Thank you.
Deputy Director, thank you very much for the overview. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is in regards to just the number of contracts over that $125,000 threshold that are not budgeted. Are we approving a lot of contracts that aren't budgeted, or is most of what we approve already budgeted for?
So for 2023, there was one contract that came to council over $100,000 that was not budgeted, and that was the train for Bellevue Park. Everything else was budgeted and part of the budget package that was presented to you with that approval.
So if we did these recommendations, we would virtually eliminate approvals of contracts under $250,000 because almost everything is budgeted in that range. Okay, and then the other question is in the memo it had the number of contracts over the last 4 years in the 0 to 9,000 all the way up to over 100,000 range, but there's no over 250,000. So I can't actually tell from this data how many contracts this would eliminate. Not that it matters all that much, but would be a really helpful data point to know how many approvals are we going to be seeing a reduction of.
So I can go back and give you previous information from 2021 and 2022, but for 2023, there were, it would reduce the amount of contracts there were 94 that came to council. It would reduce that so there were 53 that were over 250,000. So you would only see 53. For 2023, you saw 94 contracts that were over 100, so that would be a reduction of 41 contracts that would have came to you last year.
Okay, that's a significant number. Very good. I like the recommendations. I'm interested to hear other council members' feedback, but thank you for all the work that went into this. Well, good analysis on the reasoning behind the changes as well.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Would this include, for the few contracts that we've been approved since I've been on council, a lot of them are almost retro, where, it's already in effect. We need you to approve it. So would that prevent that from happening? Let me give you an example. One of them was for $400,000 and some odd while a department was waiting for an RFP to go through. So it was we're waiting for this to go through. This group's doing this type of contract. So that can, to help prevent that type of thing from going through.
The goal is yes. The contract you are speaking of, I believe if it's was it the MV transportation contract for the transport? That one, we did with RFP. We were working on that. We worked on the scope of that for a long time. It got published, and based on the December timeframe, we could not take it to council for approval in December. That's why it had to wait till January. The goal is that we are looking at contracts in much more detail and depth, that we are not missing these expired contracts. So we are trying to make sure that they are presented to council before that expiration date. That is the goal, yes.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I guess what my concern is too, by eliminating these, then council wouldn't necessarily know if the deadline was missed, correct? And did we do any study on the cities, the levels that they had based on what their total general fund expenditures were?
No, we did not look at that.
I don't know if that would be helpful or not. Is there a reason that we experienced so many contracts in 2022? I mean, that's unusual that we would have that many, correct? Then, what was it, 94 or 86? 86.
Yeah, and some of this is directly related to COVID funding, grant funding that we got. We received 3 large sums of grant funding. So, yeah, those all ended up in contracts.
And the COVID funding, this is the final year, right? It all has to be spent by the end of this year?
It needs to be under contract by the end of this year and fully spent by the end of 2026.
Okay. Let's see, there was another question. So if one of the recommendations was $125,000 for the limit. Let's say it goes over contract. Then what happens? Will it have to come back to council after the $125,000? And it goes over budget?
Yeah, it would need to come back if it was over budget, yes. Because you wouldn't have approved it.
Okay. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Member Ward?
I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but the question I have is more philosophical in nature, and I think it'll help me inform my decision here as we look to go forward. What is the purpose of involving council in contracts at all? What are we supposed to be accomplishing as council members by exercising our authority to approve or disapprove of specific contracts?
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's several folks in the room who may have some ideas on this. I think it's hard to know, I'm kind of talking about constitutional period, it's hard to know the framers' intent of what the purposes were originally. I think generally when council is required to have actions involving money, it's because it's a safeguard of the public trust, and as a legislative body for the city, you are responsible for the city's budget. I do think, and I think that's probably where it stems from, that would be my guess, and also maybe just some reasons in the past where maybe the staff was just, it was smaller, or there were, just going back 100 years or 50 years, where council just had a different engagement in processes, where there were fewer contracts, where the contracts had much lower dollar amounts. So those are reasons I imagine why council has a role in it. It was really interesting, though, for me to look at a lot of this, and not the majority, but definitely a decent amount of cities in the area that had basically tied the budget function, which is the function of every city council, right, because you are the legislative body, with contracts. So the fact that a lot of cities have moved in that direction kind of does tell me that there is maybe an interest, or kind of another look at, okay, is there a reason why we would want a two-step process? Because to me, it really has to be because of the financial reasons and because of your financial responsibility.
I see the attorney nodding.
I've been raising my hand. I've been wanting to answer every question. I think, too, a purpose for bringing it to council is because it does make it more public. City staff discusses it, so it gives the public more of a chance to engage with it and understand the project. That said, all of these contracts are still public record. So just because we don't bring it to city council to discuss the contract that you already approved in the budget doesn't mean that the public doesn't already have a chance to know about the project and the cost, because the budget is public and we discuss it publicly. And also the mayor will still sign it. So just because it's not coming to council for approval, the mayor will still have that look on behalf of council, if you will, because the mayor will have to look at it, review it, and then sign it as well. So there is still a council component just because there's not a public discussion. Third, I just wanted to touch on our charter. Our charter has quite a few different provisions in other cities, and it indicates that our charter framers and our citizens want more of an engagement by citizens and council, just like we are the only city that was required to change our mill levy by ordinance. When you do that, when you set it by ordinance, rather than just staff doing it or city council doing a motion, it formalizes it and gives citizens a chance to participate, potentially challenge it through the referendum process. So our charter just has provisions that other cities don't have, that requires us to bring things to council or adopt things by ordinance that other cities don't have. And so I think it is a personality of Inglewood that we do give our citizens more rights and more opportunities to participate.
Thanks for that clarification. I'll have some comments a little later, I think, but that's my question.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Prang, and then Member Noonekamp.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess my first question would be, is city staff amenable to doing something similar to what Arvada does as far as providing an update on, were these recommendations to be approved, providing that update of whatever was signed that week, say in the city manager's Friday report to council?
Yes, I definitely think so. And that's something we actually, Trudy and I talked about internally, and we both thought was interesting and something that was very doable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then also regarding the recommendation for purchase orders, these recommended changes give us reduced risk by enhancing our I can't think of the internal controls, because we've got another set of eyes. We're involving multiple departments, and we've got yet another set of eyes on that purchase order itself. So it seems like a no-brainer to me, but I just wanted to ask that question out loud and see your head nod.
That is correct. Currently, we have directors, as Deputy Dodd said, Assistant Deputy Dodd said, that they are seeing contracts and purchase orders 3 times, if not 4. And it is creating multiple times to do it, and the city manager having to review it. So we are the only city that is the city manager and directors review purchase orders, but we still will have that internal checks and balances with the deputy director or procurement looking at it and budget looking at it. So we will have those internal controls as well.
Okay, thank you. And then my only other comment would maybe be a question to council, just because I don't know how this works. But I like the efficiency proposed in these recommendations. I do have one other area of contracts that I would like us to look at a little more deeply, which would be the payment methodology that is or is not made very clear in our scope of work. So we have professional service agreements. That's kind of like a boilerplate, if you will, agreement that we use for our contracts. And then we have more details embedded within the scope of work, but the contracts that I've seen to date don't have very strong language about exactly what we're paying for, what that payment methodology is, and the timelines in which payments are made. So I'd like to have some discussion around seeing that strengthened a little bit, knowing that I appreciate the efficiencies that are coming forward in these recommendations, but I don't know where I would ask for that, or do I ask that to be added onto a future agenda? I don't think that it would hold me back from making a vote in agreement of these recommendations.
It's a good question. I see the city attorney's ready to jump in, but I'm also kind of curious if that's based off the type of work that we're doing. But go ahead, city attorney.
We can just do that administratively, because these are city forms, and we draft, and sometimes the contractor will draft those provisions, especially in the statement of work, and we can just make them more detailed if that's what you feel more comfortable with. In general, we try to keep things simple whenever we can, because then if we have, for example, a rigid timeline for something, then it can cause more problems, because then we don't have flexibility. But we certainly can increase the detail on that, but still word it to provide flexibility. I don't think that's a problem at all.
No, and I will just add to that, our contract for construction, it is in our general conditions. It's a 98-page document that specifically states that they have to submit how much work they've done. It gets approved by the project manager, and then it goes to accounting to ensure that that is correct. So that is all defined in our general terms and conditions for our contract for construction. But as city attorney has stated, it can be added to be a little bit more clear in our PSAs and our contract for services.
Yeah, I don't want to propose that I tie us down with really restrictive timelines or a structure like that, but I do think in our recent conversations around the all health contract and some questions around what have we paid for, what have we paid to date, what are we paying for, I just think that the terms were pretty loose in that contract, so I think it's a worthy look to have or discussion for council to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Prang. Member Nunekamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming back to us with these recommendations. It's good to see all of the thoughtfulness and thoroughness that's gone into this preparation, and I'm very grateful for it. I have a question about the $125,000 limit. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of why you chose or recommending that number based on the CPI. Are you, and apologize if I missed this, are you recommending one flat 125 moving forward, or are you recommending a sliding scale that every year it would automatically keep up with the CPI, or would we come back here in 5 years and make another big jump?
It's a really great question. So I believe, actually, I'll let Tamara answer that, because we did talk about this internally, and we could, if you would like us to do so, we could probably build it in that we would have a
I had proposed that at the staff level so that once city council decides this is an increased threshold, if you decide to do that, that we don't have to bring it to city council again when the CPI goes up 16% in 2-3 years. So that's completely within council's discretion, but we would support that.
Okay.
We being me, I would support that. I'm not sure about everybody else.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Well, this entire agenda item for me is about pursuing efficiencies. How does this body use our time well? How does our staff use the time well? Which ultimately, all of that is how we're using taxpayer dollars well. And so with that aim in mind, I would support all of these recommendations and would be open to talking about the sliding scale as well, just so that we can continue to do the work that the city needs us to do at the rate that we need to do it. And so I would support us moving forward with these.
Thank you, Member Nunekamp. Everyone still does everyone on this side still have the lights on? All right, you do though. All right, Member Russell and then Mayor Pro Tem.
So I just have a point of information. If that is being suggested, does that mean if the consumer price index goes down, then the contract level would go down also?
Completely up to council, however you want to handle it. I think it's your discretion and we'll do whatever you direct.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll just weigh in a little more here. The thing that really jumped out at me is that the staff hours, especially the 13 hours that the departments are putting into it, the opportunity costs there. What are they not doing? What could they be doing? Could directors, deputy directors be spending more time thinking strategically, planning, overseeing projects more effectively, thinking long term, like how much time is being sucked up by this that could be put into other stuff. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because if we do end up approving this, like making sure that those hours don't just get whittled away into something else, but actually really benefit the city. I think there's a real opportunity to reclaim some lost time here. So I think it's really good. I mean, city council, if we're approving this stuff in the budget, we're high level, we got attorneys, we have financial specialists that are looking over these contracts. And I think I want to send the message that we trust you guys to do that job well, and it makes sense to have a certain threshold where I think mostly for the public benefit, something that's over 250,000, to be able to have a conversation about that publicly. Those are usually projects that we're celebrating. And so I think totally makes sense to me. I'm supportive of all three of these, and also with pegging it to CPI increases as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'll weigh in. Yeah, same here. I'd be in favor of seeing all three. The only one that really gives me any heartburn is just going to be the unbudgeted item. But even then, I'm in favor of kind of tying in with the CPI as well. But the other ones just seem like a no-brainer to me, especially the fact the convoluted process that we have for purchase orders. There's also a risk for projects not starting on time because the director has to sign that contract at a certain point after he's already approved it 2 separate times. So I would be in favor of seeing all three move forward as well as tying it to the CPI. So Member Ward and then Member Russell.
I think I'm just about there, but the concern that I can't quite shake at this point is what happens if something goes sideways? So here we've delegated our authority to staff, and staff signs a contract. The relationship with the vendor and staff is good, but for whatever reason, council is not happy with the product that we're receiving or the service that we're receiving, or there's an issue that comes up. If we've delegated our authority here, how do we address that problem?
I think one way through could be through the city manager and through direction that this body, could provide the city manager. Member Praying did mention this maybe wouldn't address all of your concerns, but you mentioned what the city of Arvada does, which is they basically do a memo every week, like part of the Friday report, that basically has a detailed listing of the different agreements that have been done that week or that month. So that wouldn't totally get to your point because it would just be informing you. It wouldn't be if there were performance issues. But I think also part of it would be trusting staff, through the city managers, your employee, to do due diligence, through the city attorney's office, who's also your employee, to ensure that there wasn't a breach of contract and that the contract was being followed. So some of it would be trusting staff and the staff that you employ and that staff that work for them.
This also goes back to that relationship with the vendors and ensuring that they are following that contract. So if there is a problem, that's meeting with the vendors. If we have to issue a right to cure, working with the attorney's office, issuing a right to cure to ensure that they are following those contract terms and conditions. We did have an issue with Bates Logan. We did have to issue a right to cure. They got that project turned around and it's almost complete. So we do have that opportunity that safeguard with the attorney's office's staff and documenting the progress or the problems we have with that contractor to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and thank you for providing that. I think in order for me to feel better about this, I'd like to have some means of routinely informing council of those hiccups, or how we can address them. I mean, obviously, the vast majority of our contracts go through with no problems at all. But the ones that don't go well often have some degree of public exposure that could potentially cause a problem for the members of this body as well as the city as a whole. So I think, I don't know, I guess my concern, as well as I'm able to articulate it, is that we don't have much of a brake lever to pull on that I see. And as one member of this body, sometimes I don't have the opportunity to discuss it with, the other 6 members and secure the 4 votes that are necessary to compel action. So I think that's where my concern is. I don't know that that's going to hold me up tonight. I would suggest that perhaps after a year of this process, we look to reevaluate and see how things are going. And that would give us an opportunity to recalibrate if we need to.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Russell.
Thank you. So I actually do have another question on the cities that have $250,000 approval, and I don't know what Greenwood Village, they don't have an approval system. My question is, do they have a strong mayor, or do they have a mayor like we do? And because the mayor is still going to sign the contract, we read it as a council, and the mayor is our representative in how we decide things. is the mayor going to commit to read every one of these contracts before he signs it and take responsibility? Because it is his signature that is going to be on this. That's where the buck is going to stop. And I would like to look back at those higher contracts and see, do they have a strong mayor? Because I think that makes a huge difference. And I do have a little bit of a problem in bypassing the transparency of the citizen. Our number one job as a city council member is the budget. That is really the major thing that we do. And if we eliminate this, this really is not about efficiencies for staff. They work for a city, and in which case they're being employed by the council. We actually work for the citizens, and I believe it is our responsibility to protect their interest, and we're bypassing that. Sometimes I do believe in some of the contracts, council may catch something, maybe not, but 4 or 5 years ago, there were a lot of things that would get caught. And I personally cannot move forward with this because I believe that we're delegating our authority that we have been elected to fulfill by the citizens of this city. So that's where I stand on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell.
Sorry, I was
ahead,
going to answer Member Russell's question about the strong mayor. So maybe the city attorney would be able to confirm this, but my understanding is that of the 272 cities in Colorado, there are only 3 that have strong mayors, and it's Pueblo, Colorado Springs, and Denver. Aurora was talking about being the 4th. I did look at Denver. I didn't include them. Theirs is $500,000.
Greenwood Village, I do believe, has a strong mayor also.
Both Littleton and Greenwood Village have city managers, which would indicate that they do not have a strong mayor system. Their mayor is elected at large, which differs from our process. But other than that, the authority of the mayor, I think, is very similar.
I think I agree on Littleton, but I think that the mayor is responsible to hire the city manager in Greenwood Village. So we could just check that out.
Member Wright, go ahead.
I don't know how easy it would be to answer this question. Can anyone how often has the public come and commented on a contract that has a dollar amount tied to it? Has someone come and spoke on public comment for or against it?
Spoken specifically to the contract language, contract amount, just anything about the contract itself?
To it, right.
I can't think of an instance. I guess we had a lot of public comment around stormwater, but I don't think it was about a specific contract. So, Mayor Pro Tem, if you have anything to add.
I don't have anything specifically on the contracts. I had another comment unrelated to member rights. Is that okay?
Go
So
ahead.
I just wanted to respectfully, disagree with Member Russell on whether or not this is just an abdication of our duty or something like this. I think it's important to. I think totally agree with the fact that the city council's budgeting is one of our primary jobs. We're not abdicating anything on budgeting. And on the contract side, if we're going to say that our job is to approve contracts, then there's, then why our job is to improve contracts, then there should be no limit. We should go all the way down to 0, approve every single contract. I think it makes sense to do the ones over $250,000. There's always going to be some threshold. The question we're dealing with right now is what is the appropriate threshold in our current economy, with inflation where it's at, and with the size of our city, how many contracts we're approving, and what level of staffing we have to put into these. And I feel like what we have here, based on what we see other cities doing, we're right in line with a lot of cities, or even still have smaller approval limits than a number of them. I think this is a wise and balanced approach. Council retains our authority over the budget, and we retain our authority over these contracts, and we can still continue to we can issue council requests and continue to look at these things if we think there's something going on. But to be able to gain some efficiencies within the city staff side and also appropriately, right size our job, recognize that our job isn't to look at every line of every contract and make sure every detail is, that's why council has staff to do these things. So I'm very much appreciative of this, and I think it's a good approach.
Thank you, Member Anderson, or Mayor Pro Tem. Member Ward.
Not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but Member Russell's comments did spur some curiosity in me. So Greenwood Village actually has an interesting process. Their mayor appoints the city manager with advice and consent of the council. They have 4 council members, and a majority of council members can remove the city manager without the consent of the mayor, or with the consent of the mayor, a majority of the body. So it is a slightly different system of government than what we have here, but by and large, very similar.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Wright, did you still have a comment to make? Your light's still on. All right, I think that there is a majority of council that does want to see this come forward. Actually, the only one that I didn't hear enough on was just the sliding scale. Do we want to have that as part of have that come forward as well, tied to the CPI? I only heard from, actually, I guess there's 3 of us that would be in favor of at least looking at it. So go ahead, Member Nooncamp.
How about we split the baby here and agree to come back in a year and see how this went in 2024, and at that point consider if we want to move forward with the CPI number for 2025 and then implement it going forward from there. But I think Member Ward had a thoughtful suggestion about checking in and seeing how we feel about this in a year and then potentially solidifying it then.
Okay. Yep. See that we may be in favor of that. All right. Perfect. Deputy City Manager, anything else that you wanted to add?
No, just thank you. Finance and City Manager's office will work with City Attorney's office and then bringing this forward the next month or 2.
Sounds great. Actually, Ms. Peepgrass, do we happen to rank our contractors and vendors as well? Since we were kind of talking about just some of the issues that we happen to have with some of them, but.
At this time, we do not.
Okay.
We are looking to implement a new software solution for 2024 that will have a supplier scorecard portion of that. So we will have that ability to do that moving forward.
Do you say 24 this year? Okay.
This year.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate the information that went into this. So thank you very much for your time tonight. All right, everyone. We are now on to reports from boards and commissions. Go ahead, Member Nooncamp.
The Cultural Arts Commission met last Wednesday, and they're looking at how they're going to expend some of their waymaking and place-finding funds for the year. And I'm very excited to say that they are deciding to fund 2 city murals coming up this year. One around our uniquely Inglewood theme and a great kind of art activation, hopefully in this space that will be live for the summer concert series this summer, and a place for folks to take photos and show their pride in Inglewood. And then hopefully one that will engage the community in creating the mural in the South Broadway Downtown Development Authority area, specifically around the Paseos. So we'll be looking for some more public art. They also continue to work on installing some of the median art that they purchased last year. That will be happening on the pedestals on Hampton, on the medians there. It has been challenging, to say the least, working with CDOT, getting approval to install those, but they're being persistent. So more to come there, but that's the CAC.
Thank you, Member Nooncamp. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
We had a Tri-Cities Homelessness Policy Group this last week. The 2 big items for discussion were safe parking. We had Scott Vargo, who's I think he's now city manager for Golden, was previously in Summit County. He came and spoke about his experience doing safe parking in Summit County, and I believe they also have it going on in Golden as well. Really helpful and informative to kind of see it from a city perspective, city and county that had done it before. And then the second discussion was Kristen Toombs with DOLA, especially was there to discuss Prop 123 and kind of gave an update on how that's going, processes within the state to seek approval for those funds, and kind of what they've learned from the first year. And we were able to ask specific questions on how we could potentially make our applications for Prop 123 funds more competitive in the future. So good discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Was that Tri-Cities or?
Yeah, Tri-Cities.
Okay, Tri-Cities. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Member Ward and then Member Wright.
Region 9 Opioid Abatement Task Force met last week in Aurora, and it was largely an administrative meeting. We have allocated a lot of our year one funding already. I was just looking up the statistics here. Interestingly, the region has not allocated all of its funds. We've only allocated a small fraction of the money that's actually available. There are $6.7 million in unencumbered funds for 2024. We do need to decide if we're going to use those this year by March 15th. Otherwise, we won't be able to make any funding decisions until September. I think there's going to be some supplemental funding in the next meeting, although a lot of the projects for Region 9 are very expensive. And we just don't have adequate funding for them right now with the opioid settlement dollars. These are things like walk-in treatment facilities and other types of diversion and treatment programs where there's a large staffing and treatment financial burden, as well as just the overall real estate burden of standing something up. Notably, one of the interesting things is this funding from this national settlement is everywhere in the country, or largely everywhere. Arapahoe County has already allocated and spent some of our money. There was a report in the Boston Globe about Massachusetts, and a lot of the communities that received funding in Massachusetts have not spent any of it yet. They're still standing up their committees and trying to figure out what to do with the money. So we are far ahead of comparable states right now in this response, even though we're in the very early stages. The other thing of note is that I just received an email today that the CML Policy Committee will be meeting on Friday. I know that both I and Member Wright are designees to that committee, but I'm not sure which one of us is supposed to be the voting member. So if we could get some clarification on that. I don't know that council actually made that decision when we assigned board membership, but I'd like to actually, in the event that both of us show up for one of these meetings, know which one of us holds the city's vote.
Member Ward, that meets Fridays?
Generally on Fridays, yes.
Generally on Fridays, okay. I had to go back on recollection, but I thought that we had you as the voting member, but I don't think that we specifically stated it. So, yeah, so I think we may just want to decide that tonight, but go ahead, Member Newcamp.
I'm happy to weigh in here if
go ahead.
helpful. Just given that Member Ward has been on the council for longer, I would recommend him being the voting member and Member Wright being the alternate.
I'm fine with that. It's Member Anderson. Anyone differ on that? I think we're fine. Okay, we're fine with that approach. So thank you for that. Member Wright, go ahead.
Okay, last Monday was the Mallet Trust quarterly meeting. Great group of people. So from February 26th to March 1st, the Mallet Center is going to be closed for maintenance, painting, that type of thing. There's nothing huge maintenance-wise going on. So anybody that typically goes to Mallet Center will be able to go to the Inglewood Rec Center. And then St. Patrick's Day, they're going to have a traditional corned beef dinner. And then In March, I guess, one time a week, they're gonna have bingo, so they've got a lot of fun stuff going there. Anybody that's qualified to go to Mally, you should head over there and check it out and stuff, so that's, what I have. Oh, one thing, the week of, or on April 18th, they are gonna be having an art expo that's gonna be open to the public. I believe they'll have refreshments and stuff there. They have one there currently now that's pretty phenomenal. I went through and looked at it when I was there last week. So, and on the 18th, they'll be having an official one. So I would advise everybody to go there and check that out too. April 18th, that is. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Member Prang.
My apologies that I don't have a lot of updates. I've been in a haze of illness for a couple of weeks now and on the recovery end of things. But I did want to highlight that this month we should be hearing from Parks and Rec, an update on the bond, potential bond. And I know that there's a lot of excitement around that project. They've brought the dollar amount for the bond down. And so there was a lot of excitement to be able to present that to council. And just, you know, from my first blush in the meeting, hearing the recap of the bond and not having heard it before, just a lot of exciting elements around, you know, bringing in more native plants to their improvements and the suggestions that they have for a lot of the parks around the city. So I very much look forward to that. And I know the group is looking forward to talking to us.
Thank you, Member Prang. All right. I did meet with Swedish, but I don't happen to have my notes, so I'm going to save that until the next one to provide you guys an update with my meeting with the Swedish hospital. So, and then I got a couple coming up tomorrow with Water and Sewer Board and Sustainability, so I'll have a packed agenda for the next time that we do this. So, all right, everyone, we're moving on to council members' choice. Just one item for me. Back in December, we had the conversation with Kanitha from the municipal courts about just the salary increase for Judge Jefferson. I'm pretty sure we haven't received the information that we asked for, so I'm wanting to weigh in on this and seeing if council would be okay just reaching out to the judge and having him just meet with us in a study session to just go over the questions that we happen to have so we can kind of put this salary increase conversation to rest, just because it's been a long time coming. And just want to see if anybody had any disagreement in terms of having that conversation and having that as a study session item here in the near future. Go ahead, Member Ward.
I would think that this would be something that the judge himself would want to initiate, as opposed to council issuing a summons to talk about a salary increase that may or may not happen.
Thank you. The reason why I'm asking is I guess they technically have reached out to us. They're trying to provide information, but I want to speed up the process in terms of this being an item that just keeps showing up on my email box. So there have been inroads made, but just not the information that we requested. And it's better, at least from my point of view, it's better that we have this conversation as a council instead of us having individual conversations, potentially with members of the municipal court. So that's the reason why I'm bringing up the item. But I do understand your point of view, Member Ward. Member Russell?
Thank you. I really thought the ball was in our court. I mean, other than we asked Miss Julian for certain information that night, but I felt like it was in City Council's court to put it back on the agenda. So I think that you reach out to the judge and ask him when he's available, because I mean, it may not.
And I'm fine taking that approach, Member Russell. At least the way that I perceived it was we requested information. We requested information. I was hoping to have this information by this time. At that point, I figured that we would be setting up a meeting, but because we haven't received the information, it's kind of just been sitting there. So I do want to get the ball rolling on this, and so I'll be happy to reach out to the judge.
I think if you reach out to him and find out, just talk with him, his understanding also.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. Member Wright?
Is it because they can't get the information? I mean, we asked for a lot of information.
We asked for a lot, and we asked for a lot of information, and I knew at the time that it was going to take quite a bit of time for them to get that information that I requested. It was around the holidays as well, so that could be a reason why. And again, if I just reach out to the judge, then I'm sure I could get a reason why.
Maybe it
But
was just a big ask. so.
yeah, exactly. But I'll reach out to the judge based on just feedback. I'll reach out to Judge Jefferson and see if we can get something on the docket and see if we can get some of the information that we requested. So, all right. Anyone else with council member's choice? All right. City manager's choice.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 items tonight. Originally, if you're an astute follower of our agenda list of scheduled items, you may have remembered that we had originally planned on tonight bringing library recommendations from the library board and some other information from the library just about staffing challenges, et cetera. I really want to thank Director Underhill and Deputy City Manager Dodd for really kind of backing into a point where we're really taking a more strategic approach. So in lieu of that, library staff is working with the consultant to develop a 3-year strategic plan for the library. Staff is currently working to finish that RFP with the goal of having the final draft to present to council this fall. The project will involve many voices, including those of council, the library board staff, members of the community, with the goal of focusing the library on the long-term strategy of being a library of things and an information hub, understanding that the way that we get our information and the way libraries provide information has really drastically changed in the last decade. So we're excited to go down this path, and we'll be providing updates to you over the next several months. Secondly, I've updated most of you, all of you, I think, on our new ambassador program, which are employees that are really trying to engage out in the community more, but want to report an exciting point in that program is this week we have 2 school-related events, kind of fair-type functions at Inglewood schools that our ambassadors will be setting up our new ambassador booth, answering questions, providing information on those events specific to kids and families, but they're also going to be setting up at grocery stores and other public places throughout the year and doing that. We also next Saturday we'll have. No, it's this Saturday. We'll have our second monthly service project. We kicked off the service projects that kind of go along with the ambassador program, but are also separate. I actually coordinate these projects and work with communications to send emails out to our volunteer base of about 100 people in the community. And this weekend, our project will be to clean up the Lincoln lot, which the city owns in downtown Inglewood, and really all of the area on that side of Broadway, just past the Malley Center. So if you know of folks, we actually have gotten all the volunteers we asked for plus some. But if you would like to join us, those projects are the 3rd Saturday of every month. And you can join our email list, a volunteer list. And for this one, we'll be meeting in the Lincoln lot behind Mango Tree Coffee at 9 a.m. and be picking up some trash and cleaning things up. The first project element that we did was in January, and it was painting inside and a little bit on the outside of the barn at Bellevue Farm and Train. So we try to do a few things inside when it's cold months, or something like cleaning up trash that people can just bundle up for us. So excited about those, launching those, really trying to respond to council's direction and guidance that we want to be as in the community as we can be, that a lot of times our community members don't have a name or a face to put with the community. So we are trying to do better at that this year with these 2 programs. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. All right, with that, everyone, we are now adjourned. See you all next Monday. Have a good evening.